Chapter 460, Demon God approaches the sky, despair descends, just wanted to test the mettle of the Annihilation God Emperor? Upon hearing these words, Ju Luo Sword Monarch felt a tingling sensation on his scalp. He couldn't imagine what kind of apocalyptic scenery would unfold if Guwen and the Annihilation God Emperor were to fight, fearing that even the Tao rules of the universe would shudder. Ju Luo Sword Monarch dared not continue the conversation and could only stare blankly at Guwen. Guwen looked back at him and smiled. I was just talking nonsense, don't overthink it. Practicing the formless and invisible freedom body, he was not affected by karma. Even if he mentioned the Annihilation God Emperor's name, he wasn't afraid of being overheard by the Annihilation God Emperor, let alone, the Annihilation God Emperor of Outer Heaven was not the real body. Then, Guwen patted Ju Luo Sword Monarch on the shoulder, turned around, and walked along the foot of 10,000 Sword Mountain, planning to wander around the valley. While it seemed he was inspecting Medicine Valley, his divine thought was constantly watching Ji Xiaoyu. Faced with the formidable demon god Xianhuang, Ji Xiaoyu completely unleashed the power of the primordial Taoist talisman. Although Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor did not join the battle, he was setting up a formation, channeling mysterious forces from other great heaven and earth to aid Ji Xiaoyu. Guwen saw 3 towering figures in that formation, which he estimated were the other 3 from the group of Yin-Yang 4 emperors. The intense power of the Reincarnation Path Emperor erupted, alarming various sects around the world and attracting more great cultivators and great demons to support. Guwen saw that Yang Xian Emperor and others also chose to join the fight, continuing to fiercely battle with the demon god Xianhuang. At the same time, at the edge of the 3rd Medicine Valley, atop a mountain peak by the cliff, Long Qing sat, his brows furrowed as he gazed at the sky, lost in thought. Yu Yingying approached from behind, standing beside him, and asked, "Do you feel something?" Long Qing turned to look at Yu Yingying and said, "Yes, Aunt Yu, do you feel it too?" Yu Yingying had raised him since he was a child. In his heart, she was like his mother, and despite his age he still respected Yu Yingying deeply. Yu Yingying's eyes were complex, she spoke softly, "Yes, I have recovered many memories and also felt the call of the origin, urging me to join that slaughter." Long Qing's frown deepened, and he continued, "I haven't recovered my memories, but I too feel a voice urging me to go out and join the battle." Yu Yingying turned to look at him, having sensed the aura of the same origin from him years ago. She knew Long Qing was also a reincarnated heavenly demon, but she had never mentioned it to anyone else, believing that Guwen also knew this, and thus, had always refrained from teaching him cultivation. "Think more about your master's teachings. It might also be a tribulation for us," said Yu Yingying earnestly. Long Qing nodded. "Don't worry, my teacher has already warned me, I won't be reckless, and I know exactly who I am. I am Long Qing, and nothing from the past concerns me." He had lived for hundreds of years, cultivated for many years, and somewhat understood the matters of past life reincarnation. He speculated that if his past identity were revealed, it would bring great trouble, which was also why his master dared not teach him. The two turned their heads towards the horizon, continuing to share their feelings. They were just the tip of the iceberg. In various places around the world, reincarnated heavenly demons began to rampage and lose their senses until they reverted to their true demonic nature and started slaughtering all living beings. Guwen was not only focused on Ji Xiaoyu, his divine thought also covered various places around the world, continuing to exterminate heavenly demons and save the mortal spirits. He did not intend to change the larger situation in the world but wished to make the remaining lives of many mortal spirits somewhat better. Dark clouds churned, demonic chi roamed the mortal world, and occasionally fierce winds roared across the land, shaking the mountains. And Hao and a group of cultivators stood on a mountain peak, staring at the battle ahead, all showing a look of shock. Even the conceited and Hao could not remain composed. At the edge of the earth, the figure of demon god Xianhuang, taller than mountains, stood. His long hair transformed into a mass of dragons twisting and continuously spewing flames. His arms, bigger than mountain ranges, swung ceaselessly, and several huge immortal path supreme treasures surrounded him. Various divine skills burst forth, shaking heaven and earth. And Hao's gaze fixed on a figure, A female cultivator clad in a black robe with her face covered by a black and white mask resembling a Taiji diagram. Her long hair fluttered, and behind her, a majestic golden wheel hovered, from which golden dragons surged forth, vying to attack the demon god Xianhuang. It was Ji Xiaoyu. The power of the primordial Taoist talisman had been fully unleashed, and now she, in her original form, was contending against demon god Xianhuang. Her figure was only 100 zhang tall, far smaller than demon god Xianhuang, but her aura was in no way inferior to demon god Xianhuang. At least from afar, and Hao and the others could not ignore her. And Hao even compared her to the Yang Xian Emperor and found that this woman was in no way inferior. Moreover, he felt as if he had seen her somewhere before. Roar! Demon god Xianhuang roared again, its voice strained to exhaustion, causing heaven and earth to tremble violently. Above its head, the dark clouds churned violently, forming a black vortex with thunder and lightning flashing inside, as if some terrifying being was about to be summoned. Boom! A fearsome figure descended from the black vortex, landing on the ground and raising a dust cloud 10,000 zhang high. Another demon god Xianhuang. Upon closer inspection, this demon god differed from demon god Xianhuang only slightly in skin tone, almost like an avatar, his aura not at all weaker than demon god Xuanwang's. His appearance caused faces like the Yang Xian Emperor's and others to change drastically. One demon god Xianhuang was enough to drive them to despair, let alone another one. How could they possibly stand against them? Transformed into the reincarnation path emperor, Ji Xiaoyu did not show much reaction, at least the mask covered her expression. Two demon god Xuanwangs stood side by side, like the highest peaks in the world, exuding an aura that disdainfully overlooked all living beings. In their presence, everything in the world seemed to diminish. For a moment, the great battle paused, the forces of great heavenly spirit land dared not make any rash moves, while the two demon god Xuanwangs fell into a peculiar state of stillness. What's going on? A cultivator beside and Hao frowned and asked, the other cultivators also becoming even more tense. Such a scenario was truly ominous, as if a great disaster was about to befall them. Suddenly sensing something, and Hao abruptly looked up, his expression changing dramatically, he couldn't help but exclaim, "How is this possible?" The other cultivators also looked up, all of them turning pale with fright. In the sky, within the dark clouds, terrifying figures loomed, all immensely large, their forms identical to that of demon god Xianhuang. Yang Xian Emperor and Holy Minister also turned pale. In the distance, on the desolate land where the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor was forming formations, he too was dumbfounded, his body trembling, unable to believe his eyes. "How can there be so many?" the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor said tremblingly. Behind him, three huge shadowy figures constantly supplied power to the reincarnation path emperor, but these three figures seemed insignificant in front of the myriad demon god figures, like ants looking up to a god. As far as the eye could see, the figures of demon god Xianhuang filled the whole firmament, each one already monstrous in size, now numbering over 100, forming a scene that drove all beings to despair. Chapter 461. Defying the Heavens, a Battle in Outer Heaven. Supreme Sect, Third Medicine Valley. All the disciples outside the houses gazed up, their pupils dilating, reflecting the terrifying visage in the sky, fear creeping across everyone's faces. The black clouds in the sky surged endlessly, revealing only small parts of the horrific figures of the demon gods Xianhuang, yet even the sight of their feet was enough to chill the spine. What in the world is that? So many, could these really be heavenly demons? How can they be so massive? Are they coming for our Taicang continent? Don't panic, we have soared Venerable Fudao, what's there to fear? Disciples in the valley discussed among themselves, trying to dispel the fear in their hearts, while those inside the houses also came out. An Xen looked up at the terrifying scene in the sky, her eyebrows knitted tightly. She looked towards Guan's loft, feeling the presence of her master, and her heart suddenly calmed. With the master here, even if the sky falls, there is no problem. Meanwhile, inside the house, Guan held a book in one hand and twirled the fate-determining pen in the other, raising his eyebrows slightly as he muttered to himself, "Have you sensed it yet?" Before Ji Xiaoyu left, Gu En divined her future. She was meant to face a single demon god Xianhuang. After a fierce battle and securing victory, she would encounter the Annihilation God Emperor's intervention. Now, the number of demon gods Xianhuang had surged to 120. Clearly the Annihilation God Emperor had foreseen something. His target was not Ji Xiaoyu, nor the free immortals of the great heavenly spirit land, but Gu En had eradicated many heavenly demons. The Annihilation God Emperor could not be unaware. However, the Annihilation God Emperor could not foresee the hidden hand behind all this, so he dispatched more demon gods Xianhuang. If he knew it was Gu En, he would have directly descended upon the third Medicine Valley himself. Gu En was proficient in various sorceries to isolate causal divination, making him inscrutable to the Annihilation God Emperor. As Gu En looked at the lifespan notifications that kept popping up, a smile formed on his lips. In the last 2 days, by eliminating heavenly demons, he had already amassed 2 billion years of lifespan. Once this ordeal was over, he planned to prepare for his breakthrough, to reach higher realms sooner for peace of mind. At that moment, footsteps approached from outside the door. "Come in." Before Shenzhen had even reached the door, Gu En's voice had already reached her. The door was pushed open, and Shenzhen stepped quickly inside, closing the door behind her, then walked over to Gu En's desk and slammed a scroll onto the surface. "How is it? How well did I draw?" Shenzhen asked proudly. Gu En looked intently and saw the figure of a demon god Xianhuang rendered lifelike on the scroll. Gu En raised an eyebrow, surprised, and asked, "How did you manage to draw this?" With Shenzhen's cultivation level, even if she could approach a demon god Xianhuang, it was impossible for her to clearly see their complete form. Could someone have visited her in a dream again? Gu En quietly divined, but did not sense anyone else's causality in Shenzhen. The fact that Demon Shore chose Shenzhen was no coincidence. It was because of her talent. Gu En had thought it was his Taoist intent that influenced Shenzhen, but now it seemed her own comprehension was also astonishing. Shenzhen laughed proudly. "I listened to their roars and started imagining what kind of existence they really are, and then I figured it out. Moreover, after drawing them, I feel that my chi blood has also strengthened a lot. This feeling is too wonderful. I haven't had such a sensation in many years. It seems my talent has returned." Gu En couldn't help but praise her, which made her even more elated. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the battlefield was in extreme tension. Demon gods Xianhuang descended from the sky, causing the land to tremble. Many fell into the ocean, yet somehow they remained close to each other. A continent several times the size of Taizong continent could only accommodate 10 demon gods Xianhuang standing. And Hao and others were frightened into retreat, and it wasn't just them. All cultivators below the level of free immortal were evacuating. Yang Xian Emperor, Holy Minister, and others were surrounded by demon gods Xianhuang. They stood back to back, their faces grim as they surveyed the surroundings. As Ji Xiaoyu transformed into the Reincarnation Path Emperor, she found herself encircled as well. Her 100 zhang stature seemed like a pebble at the foot of Mount Tai in front of over 100 demon gods Xianhuang. Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperors stood in the middle of a formation, the 3 virtual shadows behind him dispersing with the wind, his body shaking continuously. He didn't gaze at the demon gods Xianhuang but kept his head down, eyes wide open. An indescribable killing intent targeted him, rendering him immobile. How could this happen? With great difficulty, the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor uttered a word, unable to say more. He wanted to warn Ji Xiaoyu but found himself unable to speak. He could only mutter fearfully in his heart. At that moment, an immense pressure enveloped the entire world. "The fate of the great heavenly spirit land has expired. Your interference is against the heavens." It was the voice of the Annihilation God Emperor, resonant and echoing throughout the great heavenly spirit land, heard clearly by all beings. The phrase, "fate has expired," filled most living beings with despair, but hearing someone was intervening, a spark of hope ignited in their hearts. The Holy Court, Xingtian? The Red Dust Immortal Emperor? Or perhaps the reincarnator that hides within the mortal world? No matter who it is, Do you truly intend to withstand the grand heavenly might? The voice of the Annihilation God Emperor rose again, and as his words ended, 120 demon gods Xianhuang unleashed devastating auras, shattering their continent, stirring up oceans into colossal waves that soared into the sky. The overwhelming pressure caused even the free immortals to fall, including Ji Xiaoyu. Although Ji Xiaoyu wore a mask, concealing her eyes, from her clenched jaw, it was clear she was unable to resist. Chapter 461. Defying the Heavens, a Battle in Outer Heaven. _2 All over the world, cracks began to appear, and even the Taizong continent began to tremble violently. The supreme sect immediately fell into chaos. Faced with such pressure, they could no longer afford to believe in Sword Venerable Fudao. They instinctively felt panic. Inside the loft, Shenzhen was also frightened by this pressure, her face pale. She carefully looked at Guan and asked, "Who was speaking just now? It wasn't the demon god from my painting, right?" Guan glanced at her and said, "Indeed, it's not the demon god from the painting, it's someone much more powerful." Each demon god Shenhuang possessed the pinnacle of strength in the free immortal realm. Their combined momentum made it impossible for the great heavenly spirit land to endure. The chi fortune of schools all over the world began to disperse, mountains and rivers collapsed, and grotto heavens were torn. Everything was moving towards destruction. Lava surged from crevices in the ground, driving away the mortal spirits, but the mortal spirits could not outrun natural disasters. Like a flood sweeping over an ant nest, life at that moment became incredibly fragile. Ji Xiaoyu, Yang Xian Emperor, and other free immortals were pressed down by the overwhelming presence of the demon gods Xianhuang as if plunged into the seabed. They seemed to have arrived in the lower realm. Looking up, the demon gods Xianhuang stood above the sea, supremely confident, looking down upon them as if viewing ants. Damn it! The holy minister gritted his teeth. He was no longer afraid but angered by the words of the Annihilation God Emperor. Heavenly will? They of the holy court were the heaven of the great heavenly spirit land. The thoughts of the Yang Xian Emperor were similar to those of the holy minister. Even in death, he did not want to acknowledge that the other party represented heaven. What saddened them most was that not just them, but all beings in the great heavenly spirit land at that moment didn't even have the right to speak. In front of that voice earlier, were they any different from plants? If it really is the heavenly will, then tell me why the heavenly will doesn't let heaven and earth perish on their own, instead letting these undead puppets come out to slaughter? Suddenly, a voice sounded. For some reason at that moment, all beings in the world felt a sense of relief. All disasters on earth paused in an instant, only living beings could continue to move. The oppressive force of the demon gods Xianhuang on them was quickly receding. This voice was Guan's. Upon hearing this, and Hao took a deep breath, turned around, and looked towards the figures of the demon gods Xianhuang in the distance, his eyes filled with anticipation. He wanted to see how his master would eradicate these demon gods. Within the third medicine valley, thousands of disciples turned their heads simultaneously toward Gu An's loft. Atop the mountain, Long Qing, along with Yu Yingying, also turned around. Before 10,000 Sword Mountain, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch turned, his face showing a tense yet excited expression. Such a matchless battle was a rare sight. The entire supreme sect suddenly quieted down. The subsect, Yi Lan, Zhen Qin were floating in the air, presiding over the formation, but upon hearing Gu An's words, they suddenly froze. "Senior brother." "Master." The two women instinctively looked up at the sky. At that moment, the enormous shadows of the demon gods seemed not as terrifying as before. Far away in the Juhua sect, Jiang Qiong was equally stunned. She felt fear from the words of the Annihilation God Emperor and was hesitating whether to abandon the Juhua sect. Then the sound of Gu An's voice arose. She could not have mistaken it. The voice just now definitely belonged to Guan. "So it's you, Sword Venerable Fudao. I originally thought you were merely in hiding here, but it seems you have other plans." The voice of the Annihilation God Emperor resounded. Far in the cosmos, Black City shook violently, and the grand doors burst open. The Annihilation God Emperor stepped out from the immense black aura as if he had come from the chaotic void, exuding an ancient and vast aura. I indeed do not desire to interfere in worldly affairs, but your self-righteous behavior and your words are unacceptable to me. The fate of this world should be determined by this land itself. Even if its beings are to die, they should perish under the power of heaven and earth, not by the hands of an outsider like you. Guan's voice rang out again, conducting a remote conversation with the Annihilation God Emperor, fearless and even displaying a resolve that stirred the spirits of all beings. His words resonated deeply with the hearts of the beings. Indeed, why should their life and death be determined by the heavenly demon? Third Medicine Valley, inside the loft. Shenzhen looked at Guan opposite her, extremely excited. Just separated by a table, watching Guan sitting calmly, sizing her up while conversing with a mysterious enemy capable of destroying heaven and earth, she was so moved that she even wanted to kneel down and worship Guan. The scene before her was not difficult to depict, but the impact Guan had on her made it impossible for her to continue drawing. Guan put down the scroll, lifted the fate-determining pen, and smiled at Shenzhen. Would you like me to write a couple of words for your painting? Shenzhen was still stunned and nodded subconsciously. Guan then firmly held the fate-determining pen and wrote on the painting. If you must interfere, then obliterate the demon god and come to outer heaven to battle with us. The tone of the Annihilation God Emperor suddenly changed, filled with oppression. He seemed to tear away his hypocritical facade, transforming from solemn and heavy to wickedly powerful. Battle in outer heaven. His challenge made all beings in the heaven and earth hold their breath and concentrate. The beings awaited the response from Sword Venerable Fudao. After a few moments, "Good!" Guan's voice suddenly rang out, uttering just one word, yet it brought boundless hope to all beings. At the same time, inside the house, as Guan wrote down the last character, he swung the fate-determining pen forward, and ink flew out, soaring right in front of Shenzhen. Shenzhen subconsciously turned her head, trying to chase the flowing ink. With this stroke, Guan utilized his causal power. The terrifying causal power of Xian Yuan's Zai Xian swept unnoticed across mountains and lakes, vast oceans and islands, flying past countless birds and through fleeing cultivators and demons. Located underwater, Ji Xiaoyu, Yang Xian Emperor, and others looked upwards at the arrogant figures of the demon gods, their tension escalating as they awaited the intervention of Sword Venerable Fudao. Suddenly, every free immortal felt a shudder in their soul, overwhelmed by an indescribable fear, and then they witnessed a scene they would never forget. The figures of the Xianhuang demon gods above seemed to be extinguished by an invisible hurricane, all disappearing in ashes together. Everything happened so quickly that the free immortals couldn't even react in time. In an instant, 120 Xianhuang demon gods ceased to exist. Inside the house, Guan stood up and walked around the table. Shenzhen's gaze subconsciously followed him, and she saw him approach her. Guan pointed at the white paper that had appeared on the table without her noticing, smiled, and said, "Can you draw me next? Make sure to depict me handsomely." Upon hearing this, Shenzhen instinctively grabbed Guan's arm, breaking from her fervent emotions. She looked at him and asked through gritted teeth, "Are you confident?" Somehow, seeing Guan about to leave filled Shenzhen with anxiety. She thought of those heroes in stories preparing for their final moments of glory. Although she was unclear about who the Annihilation God Emperor truly was or how powerful, it was obvious from his previous words that he did not fear Sword Venerable Fudao. Guan smiled, "I'm not confident, but I still need to stand up, otherwise, who will champion this world? Don't forget, you're also part of this world." He gently broke free from Shenzhen's hand and walked to the windowsill. Shenzhen turned to look, and unexpectedly, sunlight appeared outside the previously dim window, shining directly on Guan. Under the sunlight, Guan gradually became ethereal and finally disappeared with the light. Shenzhen couldn't help but cover her chest, feeling an indescribable discomfort. Outside the attic, thousands of disciples who had been closely watching saw Guan transform into light and leave, leaving them all stunned in place. They instinctively looked up. A hole appeared in the sea of dark clouds engulfing the sky, and sunlight poured down from there. Under the mystic pure tree, An Exion looked up at the cloud hole in the sky, feeling infinite admiration rising within her. Master, is this the moment you spoke of, turning the tide? Guwen had taught her more than once to concentrate on cultivating, as the significance of diligent cultivation was to turn the tide when faced with crises others couldn't handle. The rewards in that moment would exceed being powerful itself. Before, an Exen did not understand what gains would helping others bring. But now she understood. Chapter 462 The Power of the Taoist Hidden Immortal. Countless heavenly demons hovered above the great heavenly spirit land, guarding it from every direction, all their gazes fixated upon it. Looking along their line of sight, the magnificent and vast great heavenly spirit land presented a scene of destruction. Continents fractured like spiderwebs, tumultuous seas turned into terrifying waves, and all these scenes had come to a standstill. The aura of demon god Xianhuang has disappeared. How is that possible? So many demon god Xuanwangs were annihilated in an instant. Just how high is Sword Venerable Fudeo's Dao level? Why hasn't His Majesty appeared? He wouldn't have. How could that be possible? He is the heavenly demon great emperor, the most powerful existence in our demon race. Nothing can have happened to him. He must be held up by something. Will Sword Venerable Fudao come out? The heavenly demons discussed heatedly, filled with fear towards Sword Venerable Fudao. They had experienced the formidable presence of demon god Xianhuang themselves. Even a single one stood beyond their reach. And yet, so many demon gods Xianhuang, standing together, were simply eradicated by Sword Venerable Fudao. How could they not fear him? Suddenly, a beam of golden light shot out from within the great heavenly spirit land, piercing through the heavenly demons' encirclement. The closest demons were so frightened that they hastily dodged. All the heavenly demons focused their gaze, and they saw a figure walking toward the source of the golden light. It was Guwen, dressed in white, wielding the fate-determining pen, and wearing the immortal king crown. His aura that surpassed the free immortal held all the heavenly demons in awe. The heavenly demons did not feel an overwhelming presence from Guwen as they did from the demon god Xianhuang, but upon laying their eyes on Guwen, they could not muster a shred of fighting spirit. They didn't feel discomfort in body or soul, but instinctively, a sense of reverence arose. Those of lower cultivation realm even knelt down, worshipping the figure of Guwen looked ahead, moving within the golden light, his figure constantly shifting, leaving behind trails of afterimages, ethereal like an immortal. Looking in the direction where the golden light extended, in the depths of the universe, thick black chi surged as the Annihilation God Emperor approached Guwen. Their eyes saw only each other, as if the demons and meteors they passed by on the way were nothing. The distance between them quickly closed, and the Annihilation God Emperor's aura climbed relentlessly. The heavenly demons turned and watched, all knowing this battle would determine whether they could conquer the great heavenly spirit land or not. The people of the great heavenly spirit land also held their breath in anticipation. They couldn't see the scene beyond the sky, but the natural disasters around them were still frozen, indicating Sword Venerable Fudao was still there and the calamity from beyond had not yet ended. Liya made his way through wall after wall of waves, gazing at the walls of waves around him that seemed like acts of gods, with nothing in his heart but awe. How has the voice of the primordial ancestor changed, and why does it sound so familiar? Liya muttered to himself, harboring an absurd guess in his mind. He secretly decided that once this catastrophe was over, he would have to return to the Supreme Sect to find out. If it really was as he suspected, then his whole worldview would collapse. Impossible, right? Could I have misheard? Li Ya's expression was complex. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became, even thinking maybe he shouldn't return at all. The divine exotic immortal spirit stood on Li Ya's shoulder, looking up at the sky with anticipation, awaiting its master's performance. Though the pressure from the Annihilation God Emperor was overwhelming, it believed its master would not lose. The people were all emotionally invested in the battle beyond, while Guwen, the bearer of their hopes, was drawing ever closer to the Annihilation God Emperor. He watched the Annihilation God Emperor continuously elevating his own aura, even surpassing the free immortal realm, and he was not surprised. Summoning so many demon gods Xianhuang, the fleshly body of the Annihilation God Emperor couldn't possibly be as simple as a free immortal. Guwen could feel a faintly discernible aura of causality emanating from the Annihilation God Emperor, an aura that seemed to travel from another universe, its trajectory of causality unfathomable and inscrutable, only its unfathomable depth could be sensed. Sword Venerable Fudao, who exactly are you and what do you want? The voice of the Annihilation God Emperor rang out, tone indifferent. Guwen walked in the midst of the golden light, replying, "That's what I'd like to know as well." Whether he had surpassed the original self of the Annihilation God Emperor or not, he wouldn't reveal the existence of lifespan samsara. The evolution of lifespan was his most crucial card, one he wouldn't disclose to even the most important and closest beings to him. It would remain a secret sealed forever in his heart. Without the experiences from lifespan samsara, it would be impossible for him to know about the original self of the Annihilation God Emperor, at least not now. I am here to find someone. With your Tao Fruit Realm cultivation level, yet choosing to hide within the universe, it's likely you are also searching for something. As the Annihilation God Emperor's voice faded, the momentum of the Taoist hidden immortal erupted, startling the entire cosmos. The Tao rules in the void began to rage, infinite Tao spiritual energy surged, raising waves of energy. The faces of the free immortals in the distant great heavenly spirit land dramatically changed colors. At this moment, they could confirm that the Annihilation God Emperor had indeed surpassed the 9 heavens of immortal path. The difference of one realm was like the difference between immortals and mortals. They looked toward the outer heaven with anxiety, for Guwen Ji Xiaoyu also looked upward, but her face was hidden behind a mask, her expression unseen. Do you wish to reach some kind of understanding with me? My demand is simple: let all beings within this heaven and earth live and die by their own devices. Guwen spoke assertively. Having already revealed himself, there was no need to entertain the idea of retreat. He was prepared to make an enemy of the Annihilation God Emperor. Upon hearing these words, the Annihilation God Emperor's gaze turned cold. He raised his right hand, palm up, and in an instant, the black aura around him surged and expanded tumultuously, coalescing behind him to form a massive dark purple door, overwhelmingly large, adorned with various engravings, sceneries of heaven and earth, demon beasts, and fierce beasts, all-encompassing. Anyone who saw this door would feel an overwhelming and vast presence wash over them. Guwen felt the Tao rules around him suddenly solidify. Tao's spiritual energy was squeezed out, as if an invisible domain unfolded, trapping him. I have long since noticed that you have stepped into the Tao Fruit Realm. So be it, let us battle with our respective Tao. The voice of the Annihilation God Emperor rose again, and as his words ended, the Tao gate behind him thunderously opened, brilliant light burst forth, and figures stepped out one after another. Guwen's brow furrowed slightly. His gaze immediately became icy cold, a killing intent blossoming in his heart. Without another word, Guwen raised the fate-determining pen and drew a large circle in front of him. The ink erupted with a terrifying force that shook the void. Immediately after, a giant wheel appeared behind him. The ultimate mixed yuan wheel. Guwen then wielded the pen, and the grand and imposing ultimate mixed yuan wheel burst forth with a vast impulse, flying past him with formidable force, surging towards the Annihilation God Emperor. The Annihilation God Emperor lifted his hand, striking towards Guwen. The thousands of figures behind him mirrored the gesture, an endless parade of palm strikes bursting forth, each carrying different powers of rules, showcasing the formidable might of the Taoist hidden immortal to perfection. The two powers collided rapidly. The ultimate mixed yuan wheel crushed all the palm strikes in its path and sped towards the Annihilation God Emperor at an incredibly fast pace, smashing into the Tao gate behind him. The ultimate mixed yuan wheel seemed to hitch for a moment, then shattered the Tao gate, hovering behind the Annihilation God Emperor. The boundless cosmic void revealed a massive trail of energy that could not be seen to its ends, rapidly expanding as though a flood was laid across the cosmos. And Guwen and the Annihilation God Emperor were precisely in the midst of this torrential flow. Chapter 463, Rebirth of heaven and earth. The ultimate chaos disk hovered behind the annihilation god emperor, situated within the universe, as if it was the most ancient creation, vast and magnificent. It rotated slowly, as though the ancient hours were passing by, never to stop. Underneath the helm of the annihilation god emperor was nothing but darkness, like a black hole, preventing anyone from discerning his expression. However, from his shaking figure, it was apparent that his heart was far from calm. The noise from the collision of two Taoist paths gradually weakened until the universe fell into silence. Guwen looked at the annihilation god emperor, his heart still filled with the desire to kill. The Tao that the annihilation god emperor had just used was, in fact, Long Zhan's divine skill, the heavenly dragon reincarnation dharma. It was the creation of Long Zhan's lifetime, able to summon a reincarnation body to fight for oneself. The annihilation god emperor, who assassinates Long Zhan, not only seized Long Zhan's divine skills but also transmigrated into the body of a descendant of the dragon family to become his reincarnation body. Gu's judgment wasn't made through prediction. Divine skills could not reveal cause and effect, but he saw the figure of Long Exin. Long Exin had become the reincarnation body of the annihilation god emperor. How could he not be furious? What a domineering divine skill, but you have not reached the Xianyuan realm, said the annihilation god emperor, his voice cold. He had hoped that Guwen would be of a higher realm to eliminate his current form, but from the manner exhibited just now, Guwen was of the same realm as him. To be slain in seconds by someone of the same realm? Little did he know, Guwen was indeed a Xianyuan Zizai Xian, having intentionally suppressed his realm at the level of a Taoist hidden immortal. He was capable of battling Ji at the same realm. Moreover, his own combat capabilities were extremely terrifying, having invested many years of his lifespan into his Taoist sorcery. It wasn't just his realm that was high, every aspect of his abilities, if taken individually, were oppressively strong. Moreover, Guwen had struck out in anger. Guwen did not lose his sanity and said, "It seems you still have your true body somewhere, but let me advise you, do not interfere with the destiny of all beings in the great heaven and earth. The heavenly Tao has its own rules." The figure of the annihilation god emperor began to dissipate, looking at Guwen in silence, wordless. Guwen waited until his figure had completely vanished. He received no notification of ceasing lifespan. The body of the annihilation god emperor was so peculiar that Guwen couldn't distinguish if it was an avatar or some special flesh and blood form. It deserves to be mentioned that the annihilation god emperor did not bear any animosity towards Guwen, which made him even more cautious. He turned around, looking towards the direction of the great heavenly spirit land. Countless heavenly demons watched the ultimate chaos disk with wide eyes, all terrified. When the annihilation god emperor revealed his Tao gate earlier, it was shocking enough, but they never expected that sword venerable Fu Dao would break his gate and destroy his body in one move. The stronger the demeanor the annihilation god emperor displayed, the more intense the shock sword venerable Fu Dao brought by killing him in an instant. On the side of the heavenly demons, all of them lost the will to fight, even forgetting to flee. It wasn't until Guwen's figure appeared within that golden light, heading back, that the heavenly demons snapped out of it and started to scatter. Guwen did not pursue the fleeing demons. After all, they were living beings too. Excessive killing might attract major trouble. Moreover, he was now portraying himself as a reclusive great power. He had acted previously because he could not bear to see other beings suffer. If he were to massacre the heavenly demons indiscriminately, the nature of his actions would fundamentally change. He did not wish to reveal the slightest clue about the evolution of lifespan, especially now that he was being watched by the annihilation god emperor. The annihilation god emperor might have sensed the ability of Long Zhan to take lifespans, so he continually chose descendants of the Long family to reincarnate. As Guwen walked within the golden light, ignoring the heavenly demons fleeing in disarray like a flurry of blossoms, he pondered on his own. He raised his eyes towards the great heavenly spirit land, deducing its cause and effect. After this battle, the heavenly demon retreated, the Xianyu divine dynasty dissolved, and great heaven and earth once again became a scene of struggle for supremacy between the immortal dynasty and the holy court. But before the purge of all beings, the timeline was stretched long. Although an ultimate catastrophe would eventually cause the obliteration of all beings and the rebirth of heaven and earth, at least during this period, generation after generation of beings could live out their lives. For mortals, 1,000 years were out of reach. For most demon creatures, 10,000 years were equally unattainable. For the beings before the old and new transitions of heaven and earth, Gu-en was the savior. And after the rebirth of heaven and earth, not all beings would die. Ultimately, a few would survive. When the new beginning started, they would become the trailblazers of the new epoch with their own Tao level, becoming the immortals in the hearts of the countless beings. Of course, the fate would keep changing because enemies like the silent annihilation god Emperor and the battle court had their eyes on the great heavenly spirit land, as did other free immortals from different great heaven and earth. It was not only the great heavenly spirit land, but any great heaven and earth that had the same fate trajectory, with only a difference in time. As Gu-en passed through the heavenly Tao light layer, the natural disasters and calamities in the mortal world began to subside, slowly, giving the mortal spirits plenty of time to evade. Looking down upon the mortal world, a golden light shone on Gu-en's face, and he appeared indifferent like a heavenly god, radiating an aura of absolute impartiality towards all beings. He saw Ji Xiaoyu. Ji Xiaoyu's figure was also fading, and beneath her illusory form, a blazing primordial Taoist talisman emerged, absorbing her soul. The intangible reincarnation rules swept towards her like a tidal wave, ready at any moment to engulf her within the talisman. Ji Xiaoyu, too, was looking up at Gu-en. Gu-en hesitated for a moment, then opened his mouth. A slight tremble crossed Ji Xiaoyu's face, as if surprised, and then she was taken into the primordial Taoist talisman. The talisman then contracted and disappeared into thin air at the bottom of the sea. The free immortals did not concern themselves with her disappearance, all still in shock at the power of Sword Venerable Fudao. As the surrounding seas poured in, they would soon be submerged, sinking to the ocean's floor, yet they still did not move, staring blankly at the sky. Holy Minister took a deep breath, his expression complex, his hands clenched into fists inside his sleeves. He was filled with dread and did not even feel relieved. Gu-en's strength was beyond his imagination. He was now certain that even if Sheng Tian returned, he could not be Gu-en's opponent. Such a powerful being seemed ridiculous to even think of courting, and in the future, any decision the Holy Court made would have to consider the thoughts of Sword Venerable Fudao. Otherwise, Sword Venerable Fudao could annihilate the Holy Court in an instant. Not just him, Yang Xian Emperor thought the same. The two exchanged a glance, reaching the same understanding. They needed to visit the Supreme Sect. Meanwhile, inside the Third Medicine Valley, the disciples were still anxiously waiting. Shenzhen stood by the window, basking in the golden light left by Gu-en's departure. She wanted to follow the golden light to catch a glimpse of Gu-en's figure. Her mind was a mess, unclear about what really happened in outer heaven. Gu-en, you'd better not run into trouble. Otherwise, who will I write my books for? Shenzhen bit her teeth and muttered to herself. No sooner had she spoken, she suddenly widened her eyes and rubbed them to make sure she wasn't seeing things. After confirming she was right, a smile blossomed on her face. Chapter 464. Won by luck. Under Shenzhen's gaze, Gu-en descended from the golden light as if there were an invisible staircase beneath his feet. He walked so steadily, resembling a heavenly god descending to the mortal world. More and more disciples noticed Gu-en's figure, and they all felt a surge of surprise and began to cheer. Master has returned. It's really Master. How come he's back so soon? Did the other party flee? It's unclear, but there was definitely a very terrifying pressure that came just now. I felt they had clashed. Nonsense, our Master is Sword Venerable Fudao. Think about it, has Master ever not used an absolutely dominant stance to slay his enemies? The disciples chatted among themselves, attracting even more disciples to join the crowd. An Xen saw Gu-en's figure, and her face bloomed with a smile. She immediately went over to take control of the situation to prevent the disciples from disturbing Gu-en Ju Luo Sword Monarch, in front of 10,000 Sword Mountain, had witnessed the previous battle and now wore a face of disbelief. That was the Annihilation God Emperor, the most terrifying legend of the silent destruction domain. Such a terrifying being had no power to resist in the face of Guin. Moreover, he heard what the Annihilation God Emperor said: these two supreme beings were of the same realm. Suddenly, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch felt he couldn't be considered a genius anymore. Facing a free immortal now, he would find it difficult to obliterate the opponent with one move. He could battle a dozen free immortals, but to kill a free immortal would be difficult, even to say as long as the free immortal wanted to escape, he could not stop them. Shen Xinzi and Nine-Finger Divine Lord, two great cultivators of Medicine Valley, now revered Guin like ordinary disciples. Nine-Finger Divine Lord was the most emotional. He had once thought he was lowering himself to befriend Guin, but it turned out to be Guin who had bent down. Thinking back on the chess games Guin had played with him, he felt Guin had been giving him guidance. For a moment, Nine-Finger Divine Lord was lost in reminiscence. Those who had been close to Guin were also recalling the past, as Guin's demonstrated strength today shattered their previous perceptions. Shenzhen stepped back, watching Guin enter through the window. She stared dumbfounded at him, the golden light still not dispersed from his body. Guin smiled, the golden sunlight behind him dissipated, and the room returned to its normal state. He raised his hand and waved in front of Shenzhen, asking, "What are you thinking about?" Shenzhen snapped back to reality and hurriedly asked, "Is it over?" "Otherwise, what? Do you think I just went to beg for mercy?" Guin blinked and retorted. Shenzhen's beautiful eyes widened, and her breathing suddenly became hurried. "You won." "Yeah, fortunately victorious." "Fortunate and so quick?" "When experts clash, the outcome often lies in an instant." "I don't believe it." "Then never mind. You were going to draw me, why haven't you started? Can't you manage?" "How could I not? They'll draw you right now." Although they were bantering, Shenzhen was very excited. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and went towards the desk. Guin turned, looking out the window. The dark clouds in the sky were dispersing, making the outside world grow increasingly brighter. "Enjoy the years I have fought for you," Guin murmured to himself, and next he needed to prepare for his breakthrough. He extended his divine thought to cover the mortal world, eliminating those heavenly demons that were still causing chaos. As for those that had fled, he couldn't be bothered to chase them. Once he reached 6 billion years of lifespan, he would advance. News of Guin's return quickly spread to the Supreme Sect. As the natural disasters gradually subsided and the heavenly demons began to retreat, all beings across the lands understood that Sword Venerable Fudao had won. In the mountain god temple within the North Sea Mountains, Sage Xian Miao sat on the stone steps, looking up at the dispersing dark clouds, filled with emotion. Mountain god, Sword Venerable Fudao, so that's how it is. He suddenly gained insight. Identity wasn't important. What mattered most was acting with the righteousness of the heavenly Tao for all living beings. He closed his eyes and continued his cultivation. With Sword Venerable Fudao being so formidable, he absolutely couldn't shame himself. After all, he was now somewhat like half a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao. The clamor in the world continued to rise. Against the lively backdrop of the world, Guin chose to shut his door and not emerge. When the dark clouds that enveloped the world scattered, and the sun was also setting. Sunset and moonrise, when the morning sun rose, Guin quietly left early in the day. First, he went to Hidden Spirit Palace to harvest the ripe medicinal herbs, then had the deep sea dragon carps sow new seeds. Guin lay on the rocking chair, admiring his attribute panel. Name, Guin lifespan, 1-145/6-001, 319-431 physique. Mixed element golden body cultivation level. Xian Yuan Zizai Xian realm perfect 6 billion years of lifespan. I should be able to break through successfully, right? Last time I broke through, I only had a lifespan of 3 billion years. Guin began to contemplate which Taoist sorcery to enhance. He had experienced the thrill of annihilating enemies within the same realm in an instant, so he still needed to strengthen all aspects of his power. Of course, given a choice, he would still prefer to fight lower realms with a higher realm, trying to avoid confronting powerhouses of the same realm as much as possible. After a while, the deep-sea dragon carp, having finished its tasks, came before Guin, looking at him hesitantly as if wanting to say something but stopping itself. "Speak if you have something to say," said Guin with his eyes closed, his tone lazy. Taking a deep breath, the deep-sea dragon carp cautiously asked, "Master, was that your voice yesterday?" "What, you couldn't tell?" No, it's just that The deep-sea dragon carp suddenly became excited, speaking incoherently, unable to express its emotions. It could feel the terrifying presences of demon god Xianhuang and annihilation god Emperor even within the hidden spirit palace. Yesterday, it had felt despair too, hesitating whether to leave the dojo or not, but ultimately choosing to trust its master. It had hoped that the master would return to take it away, yet unexpectedly, the master directly confronted the world-ending evil demon on behalf of all living beings. Although it could not witness the battle, hearing the conversation between Annihilation God Emperor and its master made it profoundly stirred. Cultivation should indeed be so radiant and awe-inspiring, standing tall and proud against the sky. The gaze of the deep-sea dragon carp toward Guin was filled with fervor. Guin opened one eye and looked at him, feeling almost goosebumps. The deep-sea dragon carp seemed like a tender, pure-hearted beauty about to swallow him whole. How could he not be scared? "Go cultivate right away. Your cultivation level is rising too slowly," Guin said sternly, and the deep-sea dragon carp snapped out of its trance, nodded subconsciously, then turned and left. But as it walked away, it kept looking back, while Guin tried hard not to watch. Staring at the deep-sea dragon carp for a long time, Guin realized that it was indeed pleasant to look at. No sooner had the thought entered his mind than Guin hastily dismissed it, continuing to ponder his plan to become stronger. An hour later, Guin left the hidden spirit palace and stepped into outer heaven. He was going to break through today. Having just slain a clone of the Annihilation God Emperor, the Annihilation God Emperor definitely could not arrive in a short time. Guin was not going to wait for him to arrive before breaking through. Moreover, the universe was already turbulent these past few days. Causing a commotion might not make others assume it was Sword Venerable Fudao at work. After all, Sword Venerable Fudao only wished to protect the great heavenly spirit land. Guin concealed his form, and even a Taoist hidden immortal would not be able to see him. He quickly flew into the silent destruction domain towards the spot he had previously selected for his breakthrough. This time, he planned to delve deep into the silent destruction domain. Along the way, Guin saw many great heaven and earths, each encircled by a layer of heavenly Tao light, protecting them from the erosion of the Tao spiritual energy of the silent destruction domain. How many heavens and earths are there in this universe? Guin suddenly grew curious but didn't rush to explore. Once he landed on a desolate continent, he immediately set up a lifespan barrier. This continent was much larger than the Taizong continent, with other similar desolate continents of various sizes floating around it, devoid of any greenery or elevation, dark and without daylight. Guin speculated that this was what remained after a great heaven and earth had been shattered, very distant from the great heavenly spirit land, separated by 8 vibrant great heaven and earths along the way. He began to probe the universe with his divine thought, and the divine thought of a Xian Yuan Zizai Xian spread out in an instant. The universe was boundless, and even the divine thought of a Xian Yuan Zizai Xian could not reach the end in a short period, perhaps because there simply was no end. Guin did, however, see a boundary gate, which in his eyes was a forbidden land. He did not want to disturb the heavenly spirit god, so he deliberately bypassed the boundary gate. 10 breaths later, Guin withdrew his divine thought. He had explored 37 great heaven and earths that were in no way inferior to the great heavenly spirit land, as well as thousands upon thousands of minor heaven and earths. He remembered a legend that stated the great heavenly spirit land was merely a piece of what existed before. Could it be that all the heavens and earths in the universe originated from the same source, and the great heavenly spirit land just happened to be the middle piece? He thought it was quite possible, especially since the entity guarding the boundary gate was also named after the heavenly spirit. Guin was full of curiosity about the worlds within the boundary gate, But he knew now was not the time to explore the boundary gate, and he wouldn't even seek out the legends about it. Chapter 465. The Breakthrough Begins. Gu withdrew his divine thought and then sat cross-legged on the spot, summoning his attribute panel. First, enhance the physique. The last enhancement had cost 200 billion years of lifespan to succeed. How many billion years of lifespan would this time require? If it was too much, Gu would have to give up a comprehensive enhancement and focus on improving his cultivation level first. Let's start with 100 billion years of lifespan. Invest. Gu's gaze fixed on the mixed element golden body in the attribute panel, silently making his decision. Series of prompts started to appear, and he was already prepared for failure. It wasn't exactly failure, however, since it wasn't a tribulation crossing. Even without enhancement, the evolution of lifespan would still strengthen his physique. Thinking this, Gu felt quite relaxed. After all the prompts had appeared, the mixed element golden body did not advance. He continued to invest another 100 billion years of lifespan, watching the prompts quickly reappear. Still, there was no success in advancing. The third 100 billion years of lifespan was invested. After all the prompts had settled, Gu could only continue to invest another 100 billion years of lifespan. He started to feel the pressure, realizing that at this stage, a full-range enhancement seemed out of reach with just 60 billion years of lifespan. Fortunately, on the fourth investment of 100 billion years of lifespan, success was achieved, and the mixed element golden body advanced to the primordial chaos body. As the successful prompts appeared, the lifespan barrier began to take effect, voraciously devouring the Tao spiritual energy from the void. The majestic Tao spiritual energy surged into Gu's body, causing his long hair to flutter. Gu looked at the lifespan barrier, observing the changes in the consumed lifespan numbers. Very quickly. Thankfully, he had ample lifespan. After watching for a while, Gu closed his eyes, immersing himself in the transformation of the primordial chaos body. The void of the silent destruction domain began to erupt, with terrifying figures surging in the darkness and vast divine thoughts sweeping through the void. The influence of the lifespan barrier continued to expand, not in a circular spread but by causing the void to be stripped of Tao spiritual energy. The desolate continent where Gu was located was just one of the affected areas. Although powerful presences flew over him, none had yet noticed the anomaly on this continent. After an ancient hour had passed, Gu finally completed his transformation into the primordial chaos body. During the transformation, he was not only absorbing Tao's spiritual energy but also absorbing the power of Tao. The primordial chaos body had an affinity with all Tao rules, allowing him from now on to comprehend any Tao much more easily. At the same time, he awakened the power of Ji. The power of Ji was not a transformation of spiritual energy but was a power of his own will, possessing an unfathomable capacity for metamorphosis and possessing unimaginable offensive might. After completing the sensation and understanding, Gu felt he could wreak havoc everywhere purely with the power of Ji. It was indeed a physique that could only be forged with 400 billion years of lifespan. And even before this, the mixed element golden body had also been built over many years of accumulated lifespan. Gu recalled his previous physiques, ranging from low to high, as 5 elements treasure body, innate Taoist body, mystic holy body, primordial karmic body, Tai Chu Han Yuan body, primordial ultimate body, mixed element golden body, and primordial chaos body. Before the 5 elements treasure body, he had spent a great deal of lifespan enhancing his spirit root. In the great heavenly spirit land, a treasure body was already a first-class physique of the current age. Zhu Zai's Tai Chu swallowing yuan body was roughly equivalent to the primordial karmic body, which was the most powerful physique Gu had ever seen. Of course, it was only in this era that Gu had seen many powerful physiques within the lifespan samsara. Next up was the enhancement of cultivation techniques, ultimate skills, and divine skills. First came the Great Tao Unlimited skill. Gu spent over 3 billion years of lifespan to elevate the Great Tao Unlimited skill to the Tao Great Freedom Wishing Scripture. Then came the half an hour of legacy phase, where the lifespan barrier had plunged the silent destruction domain into chaos, with even some races fleeing. After inheriting the cultivation techniques, Guwen continued his lifespan evolution. The Great Thousand Follow Heart Void skill ascended from the Great Thousand Shen Void skill, consuming nearly 3 billion years of lifespan. The Shenhuang Eternal Dao step ascended from the Eternal Measuring Heaven Dao step, taking 350 million years of lifespan. The Heavenly Purple Micro Saint Dao body ascended from the Formless and Invisible Freedom body, costing 4 billion years of lifespan. Time swiftly passed. The anomalies in the silent destruction domain had already affected the Great Heavenly Spirit Land. Both the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court dispatched great cultivators to defend it. The heavenly demons within the Great Heavenly Spirit Land had not completely dissipated, and now there was terrifying turbulence coming from beyond, alarming the cultivators from both sides. However, with the presence of Sword Venerable Fudao, they were not entirely hopeless. What's going on? Could there be an existence more terrifying than the heavenly demons? I'm not sure, maybe it's related to that voice from yesterday. Don't be afraid. Despite the many terrifying Ori, if you feel carefully, they dare not approach the Great Heavenly Spirit Land. Exactly, Sword Venerable Fudao is an existence that transcends the 9 heavens of the immortal path. Have you ever heard of such an existence in the silent destruction domain before? Monks from the Holy Court and immortal spirits from the Immortal Dynasty discussed among themselves. Mentioning Sword Venerable Fudao excited them, especially when comparing him to the powerful beings from beyond, which filled them with pride. Their guesses weren't wrong. Those terrifying Ori from the silent destruction domain indeed dared not come close to the Great Heavenly Spirit Land. Many great powers secretly watched the battle between Guwen and the Annihilation God Emperor. When Guwen annihilated the Annihilation God Emperor with one move, they retreated very quickly and have yet to calm their emotions to this day. More and more great cultivators and great demons flew out from the Great Heavenly Spirit Land, gathering above the Heavenly Dao light layer, readied for battle. While they discussed the anomalies from the beyond, they inevitably brought up Sword Venerable Fudao. Some even proposed that Sword Venerable Fudao should become the common lord of the world so that the Holy Court and Immortal Dynasty need not compete anymore, and many agreed with this suggestion. Guwen, who was being discussed, had just finished inheriting the memory of the Heavenly Purple Micro Saint Dao body. This was a body refinement cultivation technique, not a physique, and it still retained the trait of preventing deduction by others, while also awakening a divine skill. Guwen did not delve into the newly understood divine skill for the time being. He looked at his attribute panel and saw he had 41 billion years of lifespan remaining. The consumption of lifespan by the lifespan barrier was also a significant number not to be overlooked. Guwen hesitated for a moment and decided to directly invest in cultivation level. To avoid the risk of breakthrough failure. Good practice, 1 billion years at a time. You practiced Qi absorption cultivation for 20 million years, and with the great accomplishment of Tao Great Freedom Wishing Scripture, you forcibly attempted to break through to the Luotian Zizai Immortal Realm. You began Tribulation Crossing but could not endure the Zhongshuan Great Tao Reincarnation Tribulation, and the crossing failed. You practiced Qi absorption cultivation for 40 million years, and with Tao Great Freedom Wishing Scripture, you forcibly attempted to break through to the Luotian Zizai Immortal Realm. You began Tribulation Crossing but could not endure the Zhongshuan Great Tao Reincarnation Tribulation, and the crossing failed. 20 million years for one tribulation crossing? Good grief! Guwen was shocked. The last time he broke through, it was only 5 million years per tribulation crossing. Is Luotian Zizai immortal that tyrannical? And this was after Guwen had already enhanced his physique and cultivation techniques. Fortunately, he had kept 41 billion years of lifespan, or else he truly might not have been confident in a successful breakthrough. Chapter 466. Breaking through to the late stage of the Luotian Freedom Immortal Realm 20 million years per tribulation crossing. That meant Guwen's investment of 100 million years of lifespan could only sustain 5 tribulations. Almost without any suspense, they ended in failure. He still had 4 billion years of lifespan left. Could he cross tribulation 200 times at most? This time, he must reserve at least 500 million years for the lifespan barrier to avoid any mishap. Guan took a deep breath and continued investing lifespan, still in increments of 100 million years each. Above him, the Tao spiritual energy surged like fog, as if the sky was churning, oppressive and spectacular. Great figures flitted by, visible one moment and gone the next. Guan didn't look up, focused on the investment of his lifespan. 100 million followed by another 100 million. Soon 10 billion years of lifespan disappeared, and Guan's complexion turned grim. Continue. Still in units of 100 million years, he kept investing. Guan's mood was relatively steady. As long as he could break through successfully, what did it matter if he only had 100 years of lifespan left? He could quickly accumulate lifespan. In the end, another 10 billion years were spent. Guan, seeing that he only had 21 billion years of lifespan left, felt some trepidation. Was he constantly reincarnating during the 20 million years following a failed Zhongshuan Tao tribulation crossing? Engrossed in his chaotic thoughts, Guan continued to invest 100 million years of lifespan. 100 million followed by another 100 million years. Guan's lifespan quickly dwindled to 11 billion years. He decided that if he still hadn't achieved breakthrough success by 500 million years, he would give up trying to break through. Having thought this, he once again invested 100 million years. The prompt length changed. You have practiced qi absorption cultivation for 60 million years. You forcefully attempted to break into the early Luotian freedom immortal realm with the help of the Tao Great Freedom Wishing Scripture, beginning your tribulation. You endured the Zhongshuan Tao reincarnation tribulation and successfully crossed the tribulation, your cultivation level breaking through to the early Luotian freedom immortal realm. You have practiced qi absorption cultivation for 100 million years, your cultivation level has improved. 10 billion years of lifespan remaining. Continue to ascend. Guan invested another 200 million plus years of lifespan, finally advancing his cultivation level to the middle stage of the Luotian freedom immortal realm. He suddenly felt uneasy, fearing that this time he might be unable to reach the perfect realm in one go. No matter, it would be good enough to reach the late stage. The middle stage didn't sound strong enough. Eventually, Guan invested over 300 million years of lifespan and successfully reached the late stage of the Luotian freedom immortal realm. He had a bit over 480 million years of lifespan remaining, and the lifespan barrier had already started extracting Tao spiritual energy. The disturbance this time would surpass all before. Guan only hoped not to alarm the heavenly spirit god. He didn't want to encounter the heavenly spirit god at this moment. He felt that even the true form of the silent annihilation divine emperor was not as strong as the heavenly spirit god. Otherwise, the silent annihilation divine emperor in his true form would have sought him out for trouble long before. Without absolute confidence, Guan wouldn't recklessly clash with the heavenly spirit god. Even if the cosmos where the great heavenly spirit land was located was a prison, as long as he could continue seizing lifespan, even if he always stayed within the great heavenly spirit land, he wouldn't find it dull. Guan watched the lifespan barrier, ensuring the speed of lifespan consumption wouldn't threaten his life. After which, he relaxed and started to carefully sense the fortunes of his own body. From Shenyuan to Luotian, there must be extraordinary aspects. As Guan began his attempt to break into the realm of the Luotian freedom immortal, Tao's spiritual energy was extracted from various places across the universe, with no traceable origin. Around the bounds of the great heavenly spirit land, the void churned up a Tao storm, howling ceaselessly and terrifying, causing those strong presences atop the heavenly Tao light layer to become incredibly nervous. The disturbances in the universe grew larger and larger, and while there wasn't the terrifying pressure of the silent annihilation divine emperor, the abnormalities in the universe's laws and spiritual energy were more unsettling, leading people to worry whether the universe was on the verge of collapse. Some speculated that it was the immense strength of Sword Venerable Fudao and that mysterious being that made the universe unable to withstand. However, no one dared to blame Sword Venerable Fudao, for without him, that mysterious being would have the power to annihilate the great heavenly spirit land. Time continued to elapse. While all beings were restless and uneasy, Groom was immersed in the fortunes of his being. Within the great heaven and earth, mortal spirits were unaware of the disturbances beyond the sky. With the retreat of the heavenly demons, a sense of renewal and jubilation spread across the land. Those mortal spirits who survived the great calamity expressed their gratitude towards Sword Venerable Fudao, and some had even begun preparations to erect monuments in his honor. Within the Third Medicine Valley, Ju Luo Sword Monarch sat meditating atop a cliff, gazing up at the sky with a deeply furrowed brow. The location was very close to 10,000 Sword Mountain, and he had intended to meditate and gain enlightenment there. However, the increasingly frequent disturbances from beyond the sky made it impossible for him to calm his mind. What will happen next? Ju Luo Sword Monarch wondered with confusion. Even beings like the Annihilation God Emperor had been destroyed, and he had thought there would be a period of calm. Unexpectedly, new changes had arisen so soon. He couldn't help but feel that the great heavenly spirit land was a place of constant disaster and turmoil. On second thought, he found it normal, considering it was the great heavenly spirit land, the center of the universe. Although it might not be the strongest land, its past made it clear that it would never be ordinary. After the battle had ended the day before, many people had arrived at the Third Medicine Valley, all wishing to visit Sword Venerable Fudao. LV Baiyan had specifically ordered the cultivators from the LV and G families to guard the surroundings of Medicine Valley to prevent Groom from being disturbed. Yi Lan and Zhen Qin, who had come to visit, were also stopped. Sword Venerable Fudao is my master, how dare you block my way? Zhen Qin exclaimed with wide eyes, annoyed. The middle-aged cultivator who had stopped her paled, saying solemnly, "Do not spout nonsense." After speaking, he instinctively glanced around, clearly wary of something. At that moment, a figure clad in tight black clothes and wearing a theatrical mask appeared out of thin air. Upon seeing him, the expression of the middle-aged cultivator became even more unnatural. Immediately afterward, as if hearing something, the middle-aged cultivator bowed to Yi Lan and Zhen Qin, saying, "My apologies, I was blind to the truth. I am simply following orders. Please come in." Zhen Qin gave a glance at the figure in black and couldn't help but pout before pulling Yi Lan into the Third Medicine Valley. The figure in black vanished from the spot, and the nearby LV family cultivators crowded around the middle-aged cultivator, curious to know if the two women indeed were the disciples of Sword Venerable Fudao. The middle-aged cultivator took a deep breath and nodded slowly. This caused the others to turn and observe the retreating figures of Yi Lan and Zhen Qin, memorizing their faces so as not to act inappropriately if they met them again. After entering Medicine Valley, Yi Lan realized there were more people than the last time she visited, and many of them had cultivation levels she couldn't fathom. "Junior aunt, senior sister, you're here." An Exen walked quickly toward them, greeting them warmly. Seeing Yi Lan, both ladies also smiled. Zhen Qin went up to join her, linking arms with an Exen, and the two women immediately began chattering away. After a while, seizing a moment, Yi Lan asked, "Isn't senior brother here?" An Exen nodded and said, "He left early this morning, but he always returns quickly after leaving. Shall I show you where to stay first?" Yi Lan had no objections. Now that she knew Groom was Sword Venerable Fudao, she was even less worried that he would be away for long. The three women walked toward a cluster of attics, and Yi Lan suddenly asked, "An Exen, did you know about your true identity a long time ago?" Zhen Qin followed suit, turning her gaze to an Exen. An Exen let out a bitter smile. "How could I? I only found out yesterday as well." Upon hearing this, Yi Lan's face broke into a smile, and Zhen Qin followed, complaining about how well their master had kept the secret from her. With a sense of self-congratulation for having dodged the bullet, an Exen thought to herself, "Master, I have learned a tenth of your ways." She was no fool. Yi Lan was clearly probing her, and she didn't want to start a conflict with her future mother-in-law. Although Yi Lan and Groom were simply fellow disciples at this point, in Nzin's eyes, the two were no different from Taoist partners. The three women began to recall the past, marveling that Guwen had kept such a deep secret. Zhen Qin was curious. Guwen had come to the supreme sect at a very young age, having been born into the Ji family. Had he disguised himself as an infant? An Xen brought up the topic of reincarnation tribulation, saying she had heard from a senior that once one's realm reached a certain level, they could enter reincarnation and be reborn, yet still be able to wield the power of their past life, which enlightened the two women. They began to discuss the concept of reincarnation tribulation. Elsewhere, Long Qing approached Blood Prison Great Saint, who had transformed into human shape. After transforming, Blood Prison Great Saint had not secluded himself in a room. Instead, he continued his vigilant watch at the foot of Guwen's building. At that moment, Blood Prison Great Saint was practicing a certain divine skill, his palms concentrating blood qi. Combined with his white hair and horns, he looked fierce and sinister. "Brother Nyo, how about a match?" Long Qing chuckled. Now that the heavenly demons had started to disperse, the strange feelings that had plagued his heart had vanished, and he was free to live his life. Blood Prison Great Saint opened an eye, ready to refuse, when suddenly he saw something which made a proud smile spread across his face. "You want to challenge me? You might as well challenge your senior brother first." "My senior brother?" Long Qing was surprised and instinctively turned, following Blood Prison Great Saint's gaze toward the entrance of Medicine Valley. There he saw a figure approaching. A handsome man dressed in silver chainmail and a white robe whose sharp aura could not be concealed. Chapter 467. Luo Tian representing heaven. Yang Jian walked along the mountain path of the third Medicine Valley, looking at the bustling Medicine Valley, his heart filled with emotion. Years had passed, and truly, things were no longer the same. After walking a distance, Yang Jian didn't come across anyone familiar. He did not use his divine sense. Returning to this place, he didn't want to be too intrusive. "Yang Jian, senior brother?" A voice filled with surprise reached his ears, prompting Yang Jian to turn and look. He saw a female cultivator approaching, her features pleasing and appearing to be in her 30s. Her eyes shone with surprise as she looked at him, even mixed with tears. Yang Jian looked at her, finding her somewhat familiar, yet he couldn't recall who she actually was. Countless years are so long, to say nothing of his journey into the reincarnation vortex, experiencing many lives. In his eyes, the time that had passed was far more than just a few hundred years. Yang Jian watched the female cultivator come before him, her joyous eyes making him feel compassion. After some thought, he asked, "Are you well?" The fact that she could call out his name meant she certainly knew him. Unable to explain the intricacies of reincarnation, it wasn't kind to say he had forgotten her. The female cultivator became even more excited, starting to recount her life after Yang Jian had left. From her words, Yang Jian learned her identity and the changes in the third Medicine Valley and the whole world after his departure. When he learned about Gu's cultivation being revealed, he wasn't surprised, as he had already heard about the recent events on his way here. This return also involved the arrangement of the Holy Court. He was originally back to join the war effort, but now he was sent to find Guwen, and it was the Holy Minister who personally brought him here. At that moment, the Holy Minister was in the outer gate city, feeling the sword intent on the heavenly repair platform. So many years had passed, not many people in the third Medicine Valley knew of Yang Jian, but his name had always been circulated. The female cultivator was no longer a disciple of the Medicine Valley. Today, she had come back to visit her juniors, and upon seeing Yang Jian, she was beyond excited. She introduced Yang Jian to everyone she met. Those who had heard his name were surprised, and those who hadn't showed warmth after learning he was Gu's disciple. This eased Yang Jian's nervousness significantly. Carrying the mission of the Holy Court made him feel uncomfortable, but the Holy Minister had not required him to do anything outrageous, just to ask Guwen for his opinions on the future of the world. Meanwhile, another person had arrived. Zhang Xianwang from the Immortal Dynasty. He had initially represented the Immortal Dynasty to win over the sword Venerable Fudao and had met Guwen during this process. Many years had gone by, and he had almost forgotten Gu Wen until the Yang Xian Emperor summoned him and said that Gu Wen was indeed the sword venerable Fu Dao, even personally bringing him to the Third Medicine Valley. It wasn't until he stepped into the Third Medicine Valley that he, too, was stupefied. The vague memory of Gu Wen became clear in his mind. When he recalled their past interactions, he found mysteries at every turn. Gu Wen's sunny smile seemed loaded with deeper meaning, leaving him feeling uneasy, unsure of how to face Gu Wen. His steps slowed. Suddenly, he was afraid to confront Gu Wen. What would he say to the one who had salvaged the entire great heavenly spirit land? What could he say? Zhang Xianwang was in turmoil, almost in a daze. Nobody greeted him along the way. It wasn't that the people of the Third Medicine Valley had become arrogant, but they had just experienced a huge battle the day before. Everyone was still excited and emotional, which couldn't settle down, plus Yang Jian was attracting a lot of attention. Suddenly, a hand landed on Zhang Xianwang's shoulder, frightening the carefree primordial immortal so much that his 3 souls and 7 spirits nearly flew out. He instinctively turned around, and then, as if struck by lightning, he froze. "Brother Zhang, it's been a long time," Gu Wen said with a smile on his face. He had just made a breakthrough and was in a good mood. He was now in the later stages of the Luo Tian Freedom Immortal Realm. He still had over 31 million years of life left. How could he not be happy? Beneath the happiness, he also felt some emotion. Just breaking through in cultivation level cost him 450 million years of his lifespan. The next time he broke through a great realm, he would need to prepare 10 billion years of life and could unlock new abilities. As Gu Wen pondered these thoughts, he asked with a smile, "Brother Zhang, what's wrong? Don't remember me?" He could see through Zhang Xianwang's purpose at a glance, and he could see all of the carefree primordial immortal's fate, even hearing Zhang Xianwang's inner voice. This was the power of a Luo Tian free immortal, able to merge into the heaven and earth rules, integrating will with heaven and earth, and thus knowing everything within heaven and earth. In a sense, Gu Wen could become the sky of the great heavenly spirit land. Zhang Xianwang came back to his senses, answering in a fluster, "How could I forget you? No, forget you, huh? What's the matter? Don't consider me a friend. What's all this you?" "I don't like to hear it," Gu Wen said with a stern eye. He wasn't pretending on purpose, had always had a good impression of Zhang Xianwang. When they first met, Zhang Xianwang didn't know his cultivation realm. For the carefree primordial immortal to be so high above and still be friendly with cultivators from the mortal realm proved that Zhang Xianwang wasn't as arrogant as most in the immortal path. Even now, as the Luo Tian Zizai immortal, Gu Wen still liked the life of ordinary people. He didn't want to become an aloof and indifferent god. He wanted to continue being human. Of course, these were his current thoughts. He couldn't say if they would change in the future, but he hoped to live his life freely. Zhang Xianwang suddenly didn't know how to respond. Gu Wen grabbed his arm and started pulling him towards his attic. Zhang Xianwang dared not resist, but he was very pleasantly surprised. Gu Wen's attitude relieved much of his pressure. He looked at Gu Wen's profile and thought him truly remarkable. Possessing cultivation far exceeding that of His Majesty, yet he could lower his stature to befriend and discuss the Tao with those of lower realms. It seemed to Zhang Xianwang that what Gu Wen said to that mysterious being was true. He really possessed a heart that understood all beings. Suddenly, Medicine Valley erupted in thunderous cheers, for someone had spotted Gu Wen's return. The disciples surged towards him like a tide. Quite presumptuous. That's what Zhang Xianwang thought. He guessed Gu Wen would scold the disciples for their lack of manners. However, what happened next astounded him. Gu Wen didn't scold them. Instead, he greeted them with a smile. As they were surrounded by the disciples, he greeted each one, answering their inquiries. Looking at the smile on Gu Wen's face, Zhang Xianwang felt he was just a common man, yet there was something about him that was admirable. True strength wasn't about domination. It was the ability to embrace everything. Zhang Xianwang suddenly felt this trip hadn't been a waste. Although he hadn't yet ascertained Gu Wen's views on the world, he had already gained something. He had never been an arrogant person. It was the honor of the immortal dynasty that compelled him, often forcing him to adopt a haughty attitude. "Master, Yang Jian squeezed through the crowd, looking at Guan with excitement. Guan smiled and said, "Jenner, it's been a long time. Come to my house and let's talk." Upon hearing this, Yang Jian was even happier, as all his worries melted away. So, Guan, along with Zhang Xianwang and Yang Jian, moved forward, greeting the disciples and friends along the way. Not only Zhang Xianwang was moved by Guan's style, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch was too. He couldn't understand why Guan got along so well with these mortals, nor could he comprehend why these mortals lacked a sense of awe towards Guan, master. Zhen Qin's voice suddenly came from behind the crowd. Guan, surrounded by all like the moon by stars, smiled at her and Yi Lan, then pointed to his attic and said, "Let's talk in my house." Yi Lan looked at Guan like this, her face brimming with a smile. The senior brother was still the same senior brother. No matter how powerful, he was always so kind. It took a while before the five of them got back to the house. Guan had them sit down and then asked Zhen Qin to pour tea. Although Zhen Qin had long left Medicine Valley, she was not angry but happy to be given a task by Guan. The master still considered her one of his own. Guan first made small talk with Zhang Xianwang, while also introducing Yi Lan and Yang Jian to him. Upon learning that this person came from the immortal dynasty, Yi Lan was surprised but quickly accepted it. Who in the whole world wouldn't want to make acquaintance with her senior brother now? But when Yi Lan learned that Yang Jian was actually the reincarnation of a holy king of the holy dynasty, she was a bit astonished. At the same time, she became more convinced that Guan was the reincarnation of a great power. Her childhood memories were not false. Zhang Xianwang, however, was not surprised. He could sense the chi fortune of the holy court on Yang Jian and even the aura of an old acquaintance. Had he already left? Zhang Xianwang thought of Heaven's sect with a touch of regret. But he had already been tempered by the years and would not be saddened by this. "I am aware of your purpose," Guan suddenly said, his smile gone from his face. In that moment, Zhang Xianwang and Yang Jian felt immense pressure. It was as if they were facing the heavenly Tao. Chapter 468 Facing the Heavenly Tao. Guan finished speaking, and his gaze began to sweep over Yang Jian and Zhang Xianwang, causing the atmosphere in the room to drop to a freezing point. Just having taken a seat, Zhen Qin was also stunned silent, not daring to breathe too loudly. Now, she truly believed that her master was Sword Venerable Fu Dao. This aura was too terrifying. It was also the first time Yang Jian had felt his master display such an aura, and even though he had regained his memories from his previous life and possessed a wealth of experiences, he still felt a chill in the face of Guan's aura, feeling as though even the mana in his body had solidified. The nervousness that Zhang Xianwang had felt earlier surged back, and his entire body stiffened. Yi Lan, on the other hand, wasn't nervous. She felt in the depths of her heart that Guan would never hurt her. "Taoist friend from before, you speak." Facing the pressure from Guan, Zhang Xianwang gritted his teeth and asked. Guan replied expressionlessly, "I don't intervene in the conflicts of the great heaven and earth, but do not provoke me, and do not involve the mortal spirits. Immortals are different from mortals, not in terms of status, but because the gap in power requires a safe distance to be maintained." After hearing this, Yang Jian and Zhang Xianwang immediately nodded in agreement. Guan then revealed a smile, the terrifying pressure completely disappearing, leaving Yang Jian, Zhang Xianwang, and Zhen Qin somewhat in a daze. "All right, I've said what you wanted to ask. Now we should talk about something cheerful. How have you all been these years, Jenner? You go first." Guan looked towards Yang Jian with a smile and asked. Yang Jian came back to his senses and immediately began recounting his experiences. Even with Zhang Xianwang beside him, he did not hold back. Zhang Xianwang was very interested in his experiences. Yi Lan and Zhen Qin, upon hearing that Yang Jian had entered reincarnation, became interested. Unlike the three individuals from Medicine Valley, the two of them were at the mortal spirit realm. Even in their subsect where they held authority, they were still at the bottom of the immortal cultivation world and could not touch upon the matters of reincarnation. They had been to the mortal world to deliver wild ghosts to salvation, but they could not fathom how ghosts reincarnated. Gu-en also listened attentively, occasionally asking for details, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Meanwhile, the anomalies outside outer heaven finally began to slow down, and the creatures of the silent destruction domain remained anxious. There had been pauses before, but soon after, the Tao spiritual energy would violently stir once more, so they did not dare to believe this peace would be the last. Time swiftly passed. Until dusk, Gu-en asked an Xian to settle Zhen Qin, Yang Jian, and Zhang Xianwang, while he spent time alone with Yilan. Gu-en looked at Yilan and said, "Ask what you want to ask." He had previously concealed his identity as Sword Venerable Fu Dao, and he could hear Yilan's thoughts, so he encouraged her to speak her mind. Indeed, Yilan had many questions, but seeing that Gu-en had kept her alone, willing to explain, her grievances melted away like mist before the sun. Who Gu-en was, did it really matter? What was important should be that Gu-en, no matter his identity, was protecting her. Furthermore, seeing the commotion outside, Yilan understood why the identity of Sword Venerable Fu Dao had to remain a secret. Yilan smiled brightly and said, "How does it feel to be so admired?" Gu-en heard her question and knew she bore no grudge. Her junior sister was always so understanding. Gu-en shook his head with a smile and said, "It's all empty fame. In this world, a name might live longer than the person, but it cannot withstand the passage of time. But that's for ordinary people. With elder brother's prowess, people will surely talk about you forever." Yilan spoke earnestly. Throughout history, how many had the power to save the world? As far as she knew, there was no one better, more accomplished than her elder brother. Gu-en smiled helplessly and then picked up the teapot to pour some tea for Yilan. Yilan read his expression and thought about Gu-en's previous conversation with the Annihilation God Emperor, so she couldn't help asking, "Could a world like ours really be destroyed?" Gu-en nodded and said, "It was destroyed once long ago. The current great heaven and earth is but a fragment of what once was, and there are many great heaven and earths beyond our sky. Perhaps there are even multiple universes out there. There might be many, many universes. Even I feel very small in comparison." Hearing this, Yilan's imagination took flight and she exclaimed earnestly, "There are people beyond our people, and skies beyond our sky. I really want to see what lies beyond outer heaven, but alas, I am not qualified." Gu-en looked at her and said, "If you wish to go, I can take you." Yilan was somewhat tempted, but she still shook her head and said, "Let's not, I am afraid that seeing it will only make me more discontent." She then looked steadily at Gu-en and asked, "Elder brother, is there truly a chance in reincarnation? Will the me in my next life still be me?" She had become intrigued by reincarnation after hearing Yang Jian's experiences. Moreover, the primordial reincarnation skill could accumulate cultivation level across reincarnations. Previously, she did not believe in it, but now she thought that perhaps embarking towards death was the beginning of innate reincarnation. Hearing her thoughts, Gu-en answered, "Of course, there is. The path of immortal cultivation is to explore the path of Tao, and reincarnation is also a form of Tao. If you can recover your memories in your next life, then you are still you. But even if memories are not recovered, you are still you. Your soul has not changed. Reincarnation might erase memories, but it can't alter your nature, nor can it change the deep-seated desires that burst forth from your heart." He had always felt that one's nature was determined by the heavens, that it's the experiences of life that suppress nature and shape principles, thereby forming a new person. Like in his previous life, he understood many truths, but he found it hard to control his own will and desires. Even now, though he was strong, many thoughts sprouted in his mind, thoughts that sometimes conflicted with his understanding of the path. Cultivation is about cultivating the heart, for by cultivating the heart, one can control their nature. Yilan revealed a smile and said, "I also want to reincarnate, and I don't know whether in the next life my senior brother will still find me." Up to now, she no longer doubted Gu-en's abilities. She believed that to Gu-en reincarnation was just an ordinary matter. Gu-en raised an eyebrow and said, "Of course I'll find you. I'll tie you to my side, trap you lifetime after lifetime. Are you afraid?" "That's great, I just fear you wouldn't want me anymore," Yilan pretended to be pitiful. Guan laughed and said, I'm just afraid the subconscious you will be rebellious. Don't treat me like an enemy then. Yilan looked steadily at Guan and said, That's impossible. Whether or not I have memories, as long as I see you, I will trust you completely. Even though I have never been through reincarnation, I firmly believe this. Guan and her locked eyes, listening to the voice of her heart, and the room fell quiet alongside them. Senior brother, what does it feel like to guard alone, to watch old acquaintances constantly reincarnate? Yilan continued to ask. She was certain that Guan had lived for countless years. She couldn't even tell if her past life was closely related to Guan, which is why he took such good care of her. Guan looked out the window and said, You see the leaves falling from that tree, and new shoots growing, what do you feel? Yilan followed his gaze and looked outside the window, her thoughts drifting. Guan's Taoist intent enveloped her, helping her to comprehend the natural ways of heaven and earth. Both watched out the window, lost in thought. Before Guan's eyes, all the past resurfaced. When he had nothing else to do, he would recall the past, including his experiences on earth from his former life, remembering always where he came from and for what he pursued immortal cultivation. As Guan's thoughts drifted, a breeze rose outside the window, stirring the old tree beside the attic. Just as he said, some leaves were blown away. That leaf seemed unwilling to hit the ground, fluttering and struggling in the wind, rising and falling with it. It flew across the scarlet sky, entering a blue sky dotted with white clouds, then gently landed in the palm of Guan's hand. This landing marked several centuries of time. Dressed in white, Guan stood in front of a tombstone, gazing at the leaf in his hand with deep eyes. Beside him, a hand reached out, trying to grab the leaf in his palm, but passed right through it. Is this what it feels like to be dead? It's quite strange. Yilan's soul stood next to Guan, excitedly speaking. Guan glanced at her, helplessly saying, You're about to reincarnate, and still you're this happy? Yilan said proudly, Naturally I'm happy I get to start my life over, and I have no regrets from these 400 years. 420 years had passed since Guan broke through to the Luotian Freedom Immortal Realm. Since their talk 400 years ago, Yilan had been eager to reincarnate early, feeling she had no hope for pursuing the Tao in this life. But Guan had her wait, and during these 420 years, she resigned from her position as an elder of a subsect and stayed in the Third Medicine Valley, receiving Guan's guidance in cultivation. In Guan's words, accumulating an understanding of the heaven and earth rules before reincarnation would make cultivation easier in the next life. Hearing her words, a smile appeared on Guan's face. He tossed the leaf from his hand and raised his hand to touch Yilan's face. Yilan did not dodge, but when Guan's hand touched her cheek, she couldn't help but widen her eyes in astonishment. Then she understood. Her senior brother was so powerful, crossing the barrier between yin and yang was not difficult. Guan touched her face, thinking of the girl that always clung to him in the past. Unbeknownst to him, she had accompanied him for more than 1,500 years. Guan said with a smile, Are you ready? Yilan nodded and took a deep breath. Guan withdrew his hand, then waved his sleeve, and an irresistible force swept up Yilan's soul, sending her flying toward the sky. Yilan watched Guan on the ground getting further and further away, her excitement fading, replaced by a fear of the unknown. What if in the next life, senior brother couldn't find her, or forgot about her? Her heart ached, only then realizing that no matter how open-minded or well-prepared one was, experiencing life and death personally was completely different. Don't worry, even if this world perishes, I will still be here. As long as I am, even if the seas dry and stones decay, as long as you are willing to stay by my side, I will come find you. Guan's gentle voice entered Yilan's ears, immediately settling her heart. Yes, if senior brother wanted to abandon her, he could have long ago. What point would there be in deceiving her? She opened her mouth, wanting to talk to Guan, but found herself unable to make any sound. Guan, seeing Yilan in the sky, could hear her heart's voice. He didn't continue the conversation. His gaze shifted toward the outer heaven. That layer of light symbolized the power of heaven. He was curious if reincarnation had anything to do with Heavenly Tao, who sat high above, decreeing the destinies for all things. He thought of the group of immortals he would eventually face. Perhaps the power behind Heavenly Tao was such extraordinary immortals in control of everything. One day he would confront these beings, face Heavenly Tao. Chapter 469 Perfect Realm. Sword Tao Saint Ancestor Gu and watched Yi Lan drift into the reincarnation vortex. His divine thought did not retract but instead followed all the way into the vortex, and only after Yi Lan was drawn into the great Tao by the reincarnation rules did he pull back his divine thought. He stood still, continuing to gaze at Yi Lan's steel. For a long while, an Exeng came to his side and asked, "Master, are you all right?" Guwen turned around, stretched lazily, and smiled. "I was just thinking about the past. Let's go, it's time to return to the valley." An Exen nodded, accompanying him toward the valley. "Master, I have already arranged for everything. In the future there will be female disciples guarding Uncle Master's steel daily." "You are thoughtful. Make sure she is not mistreated." "Of course, she will not be mistreated. And by the way, Master, there is a rumor circulating outside that Shengtian is about to return and the immortal dynasty will be defeated. Is it true?" An Exian changed the topic, fearing that Guwen would be saddened. Listening to her heartfelt words, Guwen wanted to laugh. After all, it wasn't his first time dealing with separation and death, so how could he be sad? Moreover, he and Yi Lan were bound to meet sooner or later. Guwen replied, "Shengtian will indeed return, but when exactly is hard to say. The reincarnation rules obscure cause and effect, and no one can see through it, but one thing is certain, there's still a long time until the immortal dynasty faces defeat." 420 years had passed, and there were no heavenly demons causing chaos in the mortal world. The Sky Demon Great Sect no longer existed, but the Xianyu Divine Dynasty was still around. However, the Xianyu Divine Dynasty had now submitted to the Immortal Dynasty, and the world had once again formed a situation where the Holy Court rivaled the Immortal Dynasty. During these years, Sword Venerable Fudao had not taken action again, and Gu An's life was very peaceful, either teaching the disciples around him Taoist sorcery, or picking flowers and herbs. Now he was at the peak of his Luotian Freedom Immortal Realm cultivation level. From advanced stage to perfection, he had spent nearly 5 billion years of his lifespan. His remaining lifespan was 37 billion years, and he was preparing to strive for a lifespan of 100 billion years. A long time until defeat? Does that not mean they are destined to lose? Should I warn my senior brother? An Exian hesitated. And Hao was serving the Immortal Dynasty very gloriously, and from time to time, his sensational achievements would spread back to the Supreme Sect. Guwen replied, "He understands that, rather than being concerned about him, you should think about your own cultivation. It's time for you to advance to the Nirvana realm." Originally, Enzin's maximum lifespan had not been high, just like Yi Lan and Zhenqin, rather ordinary, but as her realm continuously improved, cultivating the same primordial reincarnation skill, the extreme lifespan brought about by her released cultivation level was increasing. Guwen could not see through her talent either, but she was indeed improving. As long as she stepped into the Nirvana realm, she could break through her limits and not be suppressed by extreme lifespan for a long time. Now thinking about it, when Hao and Enzin's hometown was attacked by demons, and only the two of them survived, perhaps it wasn't just Hao's strong chi fortune. Enzin's chi fortune was also not simple, it's just that she had not revealed her talent as quickly as Hao. I have already been trying hard, but increasing cultivation in Mahayana realm, from the 8th to the 9th floor, is very difficult. Give me some more time. An Exen shook Gu An's arm, coquettishly. Guwen just tapped her lightly and did not scold her. Keep up your current endeavor, perhaps you really could surpass Hao and Jian'er. Guwen whispered softly, laughing, which immediately excited an Exen. With the master saying this, she really held hope of surpassing them. In fact, over these years, she had felt the changes in herself, and this transformation made her increasingly confident. Of course, she felt that all such transformations were gifts from her master. The master and disciple continued chatting this way as they headed back to the valley. None of the disciples dared to disturb Guwen along the way, as they all knew of Yilan's death. 420 years had passed, and 7 to 8 out of 10 disciples in the valley had changed. The current disciples had initially entered the valley watching Yilan cultivate beside Guwen, and in their hearts, Yilan was not just an uncle master but more like a mistress. When Guwen passed by 10,000 Sword Mountain, he turned around and walked towards a figure at the foot of the mountain. Seeing this, an Xen did not follow but waited in place. Ju Luo Sword Monarch stood in front of the stele, eyes closed, as if perceiving something. Guwen came beside him and asked, "Did you feel it too?" Ju Luo Sword Monarch opened his eyes and turned to pay his respects, his expression solemn. "I have seen that power before. They have invaded the universe many times." Guwen looked up at the sky. "Do you think their arrival is related to that divine emperor?" Ju Luo Sword Monarch frowned. He felt that Guwen was testing him. With Guwen's cultivation level, his understanding of the universe definitely surpassed his own. Having spent several hundred years in the Third Medicine Valley, he had gained deep insights and felt that the shackles of a higher realm were loosening. He credited this to Guwen's dojo, so he pondered every word from Guwen carefully. Perhaps, after all, your battle with him was too shocking. Even the Tao mourned, and the Divine Emperor came specifically to the great heavenly spirit land, seemingly in search of something. Ju Luo Sword Monarch responded thoughtfully. Guwen indeed knew who the mysterious forces infiltrating this universe were. Battle Court. Founded by Long Zhan, but no longer dominated by the Dragon Clan. The Annihilation God Emperor specifically came looking for Long Qing. Guwen didn't believe there was no connection to Battle Court. He had annihilated the Annihilation God Emperor's incarnation, and naturally, the Annihilation God Emperor would react, which took more than 400 years, a relatively slow response. It is worth mentioning that Battle Court had crossed the boundary gate, and Guwen was curious why the Heavenly Spirit God did not stop them. This group from Battle Court had high cultivation levels. Their leader was none other than the Taoist hidden immortal in his perfect form, and the weakest among them also possessed the cultivation of divine thought true immortal. They were roaming the silent destruction domain, far from the great heavenly spirit land, seemingly preparing to invade other great heaven and earths first. Ju Luo Sword Monarch took a deep breath and cautiously said, "Senior, if you are the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor, please instruct us. I will summon Da Hong Sword Heaven to assist you in combating them." Sword Dao Saint Ancestor. That was Guwen's identity within the lifespan samsara and also Yang Xian's most prominent title. Guwen replied, "What's Sword Dao Saint Ancestor? You're thinking too much. I've just been to the Sword Dao River and mastered quite a few Sword Daos." "Is that so?" Ju Luo Sword Monarch didn't believe it. He too had visited the Sword Dao River, yet why couldn't he learn the Holy Heart Sword Dao? He always believed his talent was not lacking. It was just that the Holy Heart Sword Dao rejected him. Guwen patted his shoulder. "Once you surpass the free immortal realm, you will see through everything." With that, Guwen turned and left. Ju Luo Sword Monarch had stayed in the Third Medicine Valley for many years, occasionally mentoring disciples. He had helped produce numerous Sword Dao geniuses for the Third Medicine Valley, and it was for this reason that Guwen was willing to mentor him. He had already experienced the reincarnation tribulation and reached the 9th layer of the free immortal realm, just one step away from a breakthrough. Every time he saw Ju Luo Sword Monarch, Guwen would be reminded of Yang Pingon. That kid was equally arrogant, even daring to challenge his master. Guwen felt that Yang Pingon was still alive. After reaching the Luotian Freedom Immortal Realm, his causality deduction abilities transformed, allowing him to glimpse the chief fortune of Da Hong Sword Heaven through Ju Luo Sword Monarchs. In that vast chi fortune, a figure was meditating in the deepest part, his Tao level unfathomable. Guwen couldn't directly determine that person's cultivation level, but from the figure, he felt it was very likely Yang Pingon. Ju Luo Sword Monarch paid his respects to Guwen's departing figure, pondering thoughtfully. He always felt that Guwen didn't take the battle court seriously. He wanted to express how terrible the battle court was, but then he thought again he had no idea how strong Guwen actually was. The mighty Annihilation God Emperor was annihilated by him in one move. It was hard to say what would happen if Battle Court encountered him. Thinking that Guwen might be the Sword Dao Saint ancestor, he felt a fiery enthusiasm in his heart. The Saint ancestor might not admit his identity, but he, as a junior, must act. Ju Luo Sword Monarch raised his hand, a burst of green light erupted, followed by a blossoming ethereal green lotus. Chapter 470. Devouring Heaven and Earth. After sending Yilan away, Gu N's life still continued. Although his heart was filled with melancholy, he did not stop striving to become stronger. Every 2 days he would go out to gather medicinal herbs from various medicine valleys, and take the opportunity to guide those guarding the valleys, leading a fulfilling life. As summer gave way to autumn, the desolate yellow slowly covered the rivers and mountains of the world. On this day, a man dressed in black descended from the sky and landed on a mountain peak at the edge of the third medicine valley. With black hair billowing and robes fluttering, he exuded an air of vigor. It was Leia. Returning after hundreds of years, he looked at the third medicine valley with profound emotions in his heart. His gaze swept across every corner of the third medicine valley, finding many places both familiar and foreign. When his eyes fell on a pavilion, a complex expression emerged on his face. Even though he had reached the Nirvana realm, facing an old friend of yesteryears still made him nervous. The thought of calling Guwen primordial ancestor made his face flush with heat. Despite having mentally prepared himself for centuries, his mood would fluctuate whenever he remembered. However, he reminded himself that without Guwen's care, how could he have reached this day? Just the divine exotic city within him alone provided him with an invincible confidence. Taking a deep breath, Leia prepared to descend the mountain, when suddenly he saw 2 people rushing up the side. One was ahead of the other, and they quickly arrived in front of Leia. The blood prison great saint sized up Leia with a teasing look in his eyes. The one who followed, Long Qing, stopped and looked at Leia thoughtfully, then suddenly asked, "Could you be Martial Uncle Leia?" Leia nodded slightly. He had some impression of Long Qing, though not very clear, but judging by the address, the latter should be Gu N's disciple. "Master often talks about you," Long Qing said with a smile. "He says that you became a heavenly genius and got carried away, never coming back to see him." Long Qing was not particularly interested in Leia. He had only heard Guwen mention him occasionally. Hearing this, Leia's face darkened in an instant, and he snorted coldly, "Is that really what he said?" The blood prison great saint interrupted, saying, "Brat, have you forgotten me?" His first battle in the great heavenly spirit land had been against Leia and Zhang Buku, which led to his suppression for nearly 1,000 years. Although now it seemed a blessing in disguise, he always found Leia irritating, and whenever Leia returned to the valley and saw him transformed into the bull demon, he would mock him. In fact, when he was a bull, he felt that everyone was mocking him. To him, even their smiles seemed offensive. Leia's gaze settled on the blood prison great saint, scrutinizing him closely. Then, with a dramatic change in his expression, without saying another word, he raised his right hand, summoning the divine exotic city, which quickly enlarged and hung high in the sky. Long Qing also looked up, his mouth agape, astonished by the divine exotic city. His own chi strength was already formidable, but as someone who spent most of his time in the Supreme Sect, he rarely saw such supreme treasures. Leia fixated on the blood prison great saint, asking in a heavy voice, "What are you doing here?" The past blood prison great saint had been extremely violent, and although his appearance hadn't changed now, his demeanor was worlds apart, which was why Leia had not recognized him immediately. Remembering the battle from years ago, Leia inevitably thought of Zhang Buku, and his mood instantly turned to annoyance. Zhang Buku had always been a thorn in his side. He felt he had failed to take care of Zhang Buku, leading to the latter's current situation, where his whereabouts and life or death were unknown. The blood prison great saint taunted, "I've been here for 1,000 years, and you're asking me? You should be the one I'm asking. Every time you return, I'm here. It's just that you have eyes but failed to recognize." Leia furrowed his brow, reflecting carefully. Long Qing looked left and right, thinking to himself, why haven't they started fighting yet? He often sparred with the Blood Prison Great Saint, and as he had never won, he wanted to see the Great Saint take a beating. Perhaps Li Ya's cultivation level was not as high as the Blood Prison Great Saint's, but Long Qing had heard of the formidable reputation of the divine exotic city. It was said to be a pseudo-immortal path supreme treasure, capable of contending with wandering immortals. The appearance of the divine exotic city attracted more and more disciples to fly over. Li Ya calmed down and immediately retracted the divine exotic city into the palm of his hand. The Blood Prison Great Saint's appearance here meant he was no longer an enemy. At the very least, Guan had taken him in. Speaking of which, he held no grudges against the Blood Prison Great Saint. They had only fought over a chance opportunity back then, and he had been utterly defeated. An Xen flew over and landed on the edge of the cliff. She glared at the Blood Prison Great Saint and Long Qing for a moment before turning to Li Ya. She lifted her hand in a salute and said, "Martial Uncle Li Ya, the master has been waiting for you for a long time. Please come with me." Li Ya remembered an Xen, and he was somewhat surprised. After many years, an Xen no longer resembled an ordinary woman. Her every movement carried the aura of a highly cultivated being. Comparing an Xen to those heavenly geniuses of the great sex, she was not much weaker, perhaps even possessing a unique charm. It seemed Guan was quite adept at mentoring disciples. That's what Li Ya thought as he recalled that An Hao was also a disciple of Guan, which made his heart ache even more. His greatest rival in life was a disciple of Guan, the primordial ancestor he admired and was most grateful for. It seemed as though his entire life unfolded under Guan's watch, and even though he was always getting hurt, he always managed to escape from the brink of death. As Li Ya pondered, he followed an Xan and left. Long Qing looked at the Blood Prison Great Saint and asked, "Did you too have a past grievance?" The Blood Prison Great Saint snorted disdainfully, "He's no threat to me." After he recounted the events of the past, Long Qing was full of emotion. The strongest being of a realm ascends, only to be humbled by mistaking a weakling with a strong backer, and ends up being taken as a mount? That was terrifying. Long Qing grew more reverent of the world, feeling that if the Blood Prison Great Saint had not encountered his master, he would probably be dead by now. Benevolent and magnanimous powerhouses like his master were rare. Boom, boom, boom. The dull roar of thunder, like fierce beasts of the wilderness roaring in unison, made the entire great heaven and earth oppressively heavy. On the barren land, corpses lay scattered everywhere, crisscrossed by gullies and fissures, with splotches of blood adorning the area. Countless cultivators and demons stood on the ground, most of them wounded, all gazing up at the darkened sky in despair. Above the churning black clouds, a figure shone with a dazzling golden light. He wore golden battle armor with a red sash around his waist, the breastplate adorned with a Qilin head that breathed out flames from its mouth and nose. Above this was a handsome yet indifferent face. This man wore a golden helm, radiating might and supremacy, with a golden big tripod floating behind him that trembled as dragon tails swished over the edge. The myriad creatures before him were no different from ants. He looked down upon the beings below, seemingly in search of something. A figure materialized out of thin air beside him, a woman in black with her hair hanging loosely, wearing a dark silver mask over her eyes, ghost-like in her appearance. "Emperor, the chief fortune of this realm has ceased, and its collapse is imminent. Shall we move on to the next great heaven and earth?" asked the woman in black, her voice pleasant to hear yet cold in tone. The man in gold armor remained expressionless, his demeanor still indifferent. "Tell me, where might the descendants of the Long family be hiding, and does the sword Venerable Fudao have any relations with the Long family?" The woman in black answered, "As of now, there seems to be no connection. Sword Venerable Fudao shelters the beings of a great heavenly spirit land. Of course, it's also possible that the descendants of the Long family are hidden in the great heavenly spirit land, but that is an existence not even the divine emperor's incarnations can defeat. We cannot rashly proceed." The golden-armored man narrowed his eyes and huffed. A mere incarnation of the silent annihilation god Emperor is just a Taoist hidden immortal, and even his physical body hasn't reached the true state of a Taoist hidden immortal. The woman in black didn't respond further. The man in golden armor lifted his hand, and the big tripod behind him trembled violently as dragon roars issued forth. In an instant, the sky twisted violently, and the land below began to shatter. Rocks and corpses flew into the air as countless beings started to cry out, the entire great heaven and earth plunging into chaos. Once I have devoured 100 great heaven and earths, I will be able to unlock the path of war. Then, it won't matter where the Long family is hiding or whether Sword Venerable Fudao is connected to them. The battle court will destroy all who stand in the way, making our enemies suffer eternal damnation. The man in golden armor murmured to himself, as if speaking to his own heart. Clouds of thunder were sucked into the mouth of the big tripod, and everything in sight, stones, corpses, living beings, was pulled toward the golden big tripod, the view filled with despair and chaos. This big tripod was devouring great heaven and earth. The man in golden armor and the woman in black stood motionless before the big tripod, indifferent to the cries and death of the creatures below, awaiting the collapse and annihilation of the realm. All of a sudden, the man in golden armor sensed something, his gaze sharpened, and he turned his head slightly as a blade of sword chi tore through the space, zipping past him. He reached out and grabbed the sword chi, then frowned in surprise, scanning his surroundings. Chapter 471, Heavenly Dao Golden Core, the strongest life grid inside the attic. Guwen and Liya were clinking cups, with Liya drinking swiftly and his gaze upon Guwen filled with deep resentment. Guwen's face was stern, disrespecting the primordial ancestor like this? Upon hearing that, Liya's eyes widened, he slammed the table and stood up cursing, taking advantage of me again. Come on, let's fight. Guwen chuckled, are you sure? Liya choked, his anger dissipated in an instant, and he sat down with a grim face, but for some reason, Guwen's intentional provocation actually relieved his pressure. If Guwen had maintained the demeanor of Sword Venerable Fudao, considering Guwen's care for him, he would not have known how to face him, but now Guwen had drawn him into a brotherly relationship, naturally easing his tension. Guwen, who are you really? We entered the valley together back then. Liya took a deep breath and couldn't help but ask. It was the most puzzling thing to him. Back then, when they first met as youths, he never imagined that his fellow disciple with whom he had spent every day would turn out to be so formidable. In retrospect, Sword Venerable Fudao's fame began with protecting him. At that time, he and his sister Li Xuanyu were attacked by cultivators from the demon sect, and it was Sword Venerable Fudao who arrived to save them. Back then, he was not yet known as Sword Venerable Fudao, but as Flying Leaf Sword Immortal. Once everything connected, Liya had even less reason to blame Guwen. He was now only curious. Guwen replied, past and present lives, reincarnation is endless. Who can completely understand their origins? Instead of dwelling on the past, why not accept the present and look forward to the future, right? Who I am is not important. What matters is our friendship, my support for you. You needn't feel burdened. I'd rather you think about what kind of person you want to become in the future. He looked intently at Liya, his eyes seeming to see through Liya's thoughts. Liya was startled, not expecting Guwen to understand what he was currently thinking, but remembering the power of Sword Venerable Fudao, he calmed down. An existence that surpassed 9 heavens of immortal path, his divine skills and deductions were beyond his imagination. Afterward, Liya began to envision the future, with Guwen listening attentively. Liya was his first true friend in this life, and although there was now a great disparity in their cultivation levels, it did not change his importance in Guwen's heart. Perhaps Guwen had helped Liya a lot, but it was all casual for him. He never found himself in trouble because of helping Liya. Divine Exotic City seemed immensely powerful to outsiders, but in Guwen's hands, there was hardly an opportunity to use it. Guwen was not just a listener. He talked about every level of the 9 heavens of immortal path in detail, mentioning the fortunes of each level, which enthralled Liya. Until night fell, they continued talking, laughter occasionally bursting forth. The moon was bright and the stars sparse. An Exon came to the base of the attic, looked up at the windows above, and sighed, "Master hasn't been this happy in a long time." Blood Prison Great Saint sitting beside her in meditation, snorted. He simply did not like Li Ye, but at his master's house, he dared not speak ill of him. An Exan watched for a while below before finally turning to leave. Ever since Yi Lan passed away, she had been very worried about Guan. In her eyes, her master's mood was even more important than the entire world, for if her master were to go to extremes, all living beings would suffer. Fortunately, her master was always cheerful and open-minded. Hardly anything seemed to faze him. After this event, an Xian admired Guan even more. As the moon set and the sun rose, Li Ye departed early the next day. At the base of 10,000 Sword Mountain, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch watched Li Ye's departing figure, thoughtful. The life grid has actually changed. He then turned to glance toward Guan's attic, filled with curiosity. What realm was the saint ancestor in really? He could not understand, yet thinking about stepping into a higher realm himself soon made his heart race. Under the brilliant starry sky, a gigantic stone bridge stretched across the heavens, its edges shimmering with multicolored radiance. Two figures walked on the bridge, none other than Yang Xian Emperor and An Hao. Yang Xian Emperor led the way, draped in a long golden robe, with a dragon aura swirling around him as he moved. An Hao followed behind, looking around in wonder, his face full of amazement. Eventually, his gaze settled ahead where at the end of the bridge, a golden red orb glowed like the bright sun, seemingly symbolizing hope and brimming with allure. An Hao's pupils glittered with an unusual light as he felt a force. An Hao, feel carefully, this is the most powerful force in the world, a blessing from the heavenly Tao, a mere fraction of the power passed down through the heaven sect, Yang Xian Emperor said as he walked, his tone filled with mystery, as if he, too, was in anticipation. And Hao couldn't help but ask, what is heavenly Tao? How does it differ from the great Tao? After stepping into the immortal realm, he had also begun to perceive the great Tao. The higher his cultivation level grew, the deeper his reverence for the great Tao became, yet he couldn't comprehend the existence of heavenly Tao. Heavenly Tao existed everywhere, much like the great Tao, but it wasn't as clear, seemingly a fusion of countless rules. Heaven and earth themselves are heavenly Tao, all living beings are also heavenly Tao, while the universe is the great Tao. The great Tao births the heavenly Tao, and the heavenly Tao gives rise to all things. In my view, the heavenly Tao is a force born from the operation of the great Tao, even more perfect and powerful. Yang Xian Emperor spoke leisurely, his pace unslowed. And Hao listened and began to understand his words. After a long time, they finally reached the end of the bridge. Standing before the golden red orb, they seemed so minuscule, like grains of sand before a mountain. Yang Xian Emperor looked up, gazing at the golden red orb, and said, "Every ruler of the immortal dynasty has contemplated the heavenly Tao. They believed that only by thoroughly understanding the heavenly Tao could one qualify for transcendence. The primordial immortal king, who established the immortal dynasty, proclaimed himself as the immortal king and sought to rival the heavens, but succumbed to misfortune subsequently, leading to the dynasty's downfall. Many years later, someone rebuilt the immortal dynasty. That was the first time the dynasty experienced the force of heavenly Tao, realizing an invisible and intangible force was orchestrating all living beings." And Hao listened intently, his eyes penetrating the golden red emanation of the orb, and what he saw was darkness, a darkness oppressive even to cultivators of the nirvana realm. He couldn't help but ask, if it's truly invisible and intangible, what significance does it hold? Yang Xian Emperor responded, "This is a golden core left behind by a mighty being who had obtained the power of heavenly Tao." "What? A golden core? How is that possible?" And Hao exclaimed in disbelief, his eyes widening. This didn't look like a golden core at all. Yang Xian Emperor's expression grew complex, and he said, "This was discovered by the immortal dynasty in their pursuit of heavenly Tao's power, located deep within the great heavenly spirit land, known as the heavenly Tao Golden Core. Every epoch, the heavenly Tao Golden Core reveals some information to us, And this is why our immortal dynasty remains unshakable, impervious even to the holy court. Through the heavenly Tao Golden Core, we learned that the great heavenly spirit land was once shattered. What we see today is merely a fragment of it, albeit the most crucial one. And how pressed on, why did such a mighty being fall? Was it related to the battle that shattered the heavens and earth? We aren't sure, but the power of the heavenly Tao Golden Core continues endlessly, and it's this force that ensures beings in the immortal dynasty are born at the immortal path realm level. Yang Xian Emperor replied, then turned to look at Anhao. Anhao looked back, feeling the pressure under his gaze and furrowing his brows. Yang Xian Emperor's eyes blazed. Anhao, you are the child of destiny, no one's life grid surpasses yours. With Sword Venerable Fu Dao as your master and inheriting the most powerful legacy from the immortal dynasty, you will become the strongest under the heavenly Tao. If you were to usher in the new epoch, in the next era, the immortal dynasty would surely be stronger. You can accomplish what we couldn't. And Hao was about to reply when he suddenly turned his head toward the heavenly Tao Golden Core. What sound? And Hao asked solemnly, his eyes rapidly shifting on the heavenly Tao Golden Core, as if searching for something. Yang Xian Emperor watched him, a look of astonishment crossing his features, his expression turning excited. Even the heavenly Tao Golden Core chooses him? What kind of life grid is this? As if everything in the world was tailor-made for him. Yang Xian Emperor watched Anhao, feeling stirred and involuntarily jealous. Anhao quickly noticed the hint, and looking at Yang Xian Emperor, asked, Your Majesty, can't you hear it? Yang Xian Emperor answered, The ruler of the immortal dynasty can obtain the inheritance of the heavenly Tao Golden Core through their chi fortune, but at the end of every epoch, the heavenly Tao Golden Core autonomously chooses an inheritor. Perhaps you have already been chosen. What did you just hear? Anhao hesitated for a moment, then said, I heard a voice urging me to run away. Chapter 472, Chosen One, Bearing Grudges and Favors, Escape Quickly? When Yang Immortal Emperor heard Anhao's words, he couldn't help but frown and asked, Why escape? And to where? Anhao was about to speak when suddenly, from within the celestial Tao Golden Core, fierce golden flames erupted, rapidly burrowing into Anhao's brow. In an instant, Anhao's eyes widened. He then raised his hand, grabbing his head. He tilted his head back, and a golden, thread-like line appeared on his brow, resembling the slit of an eye. Yang Immortal Emperor was horrified and instinctively turned to look at the celestial Tao Golden Core. The celestial Tao Golden Core stood motionless in front of him, radiating an ancient aura as if it were the oldest existence in the world. It had witnessed changing seas into mulberry fields and the shifting of constellations. Endless experiences had shaped its now unfathomable presence. Anhao knelt on the ground, his body trembling and his face contorted in obvious, unimaginable pain. Yang Immortal Emperor flashed to his side, intending to help him but was repelled by a powerful force. He was thrown hundreds of yards away, stumbling several steps upon landing. He looked at his right hand to see it badly burnt and bleeding profusely. He looked up at Anhao, his brows furrowed deeply. Anhao kneeled, face downward, as wisps of aura leaked from between his fingers. His body shook, unable to make any sound. Could he really be the chosen one? Yang Immortal Emperor murmured to himself, his eyes filled with complexity. He had chosen Anhao due to Anhao's special destiny pattern, but there was another reason. He wanted to bind him with supporting Tao Sword Venerable. Anhao was, after all, the only openly acknowledged true disciple of supporting Tao Sword Venerable. But never had he imagined that upon Anhao's arrival, without having yet done anything, he would receive the recognition of the celestial Tao Golden Core. Throughout the ancient and modern times of the immortal dynasty, he had never heard of such an event. Anhao, just who are you indeed? Anhao couldn't hear Yang Immortal Emperor's words. At that moment, he was in a realm of pain unimaginable to ordinary people, enduring not only intense physical agony as if his body was tearing apart but also immense destruction to his soul. He saw many scenes, all of which were his greatest fears. He saw his wife and children brutally killed, his junior sister suffering terribly, even his master's tombstone, all these things tormenting him. If you do not escape, you will end up just like them. A cold, indifferent voice echoed persistently in his ears, provoking his spirits. 37 years later, just after the new year, Guan walked within outer sect city, with blood prison great saint and Long Qing following behind him. 300 years ago, Shinxinzi returned to the Buddhist sect of the Sea of Suffering, and since then, Long Qing had completely become Guan's follower. Wherever Guan went, as long as he saw him, he would eagerly follow. Along the way, wherever Guan went, people greeted him, mostly his close friends or graduated disciples. Over 400 years had passed. The impact brought by supporting Dao Sword Venerable had eventually calmed down. Under the suppression of the Dark Hall of Supreme Sect, people aware of Guan's identity no longer spoke carelessly, and supporting Dao Sword Venerable once again became a legend. Even without the title of supporting Dao Sword Venerable, as the Valley Master of Third Medicine Valley, Guan still held great renown. Master, is there really a legacy with the heaven-splitting axe? Or did you leave it there as a mere prank? Long Qing quickened his pace to walk beside Guan, curiously asking. He would occasionally visit the heaven-repairing platform to try to pull out the heaven-splitting axe, but unfortunately he could never budge it. Nowadays, those who try the heaven-splitting axe generally want to experience the power of supporting Dao Sword Venerable, not to actually acquire the legacy. Guan looked ahead and responded, "There certainly is, you will feel it eventually." Long Qing was about to ask more when he suddenly looked up. Not just him, Blood Prison Great Saint did the same. Above in the cerulean celestial vault, numerous silver meteors appeared, countless, all moving in the same direction, creating a magnificent scene. The cultivators passing through the streets also started noticing the anomaly in the sky. What is that? Is it sword chi? Not right, there's someone inside, might be someone from a major sect passing overhead. People? This doesn't seem like they flew over our heads, more like they descended from the sky. Don't worry, this place is the Supreme Sect. Maybe the Supreme Sect isn't the strongest, but it certainly is the safest. In these years, the Holy Court and Immortal Dynasty have been fighting each other relentlessly, both attacking and defending, yet the flames of war have never reached the Supreme Sect. The cultivators were chattering. Guan glanced, then withdrew his gaze and continued forward. Blood Prison Great Saint and Long Qing caught up, and they began discussing the origins of those meteors. Blood Prison Great Saint's divine sense captured that those meteors were indeed a group of people enveloped in sword chi and moreover, from outer heaven, which piqued Long Qing's curiosity about outer heaven. Although Long Qing still hadn't cultivated spiritual power, with age he could feel that he originated from outer heaven and that some mission awaited him. He was no longer as anxious, but began to enjoy life, having a premonition that once he knew his mission, such life would be his luxury for the rest of his days. Guan saw through the origin of that group of sword cultivators with one look. Great Hong Sword Heaven. Summoned by Zhu Luo Sword Monarch. Great Hong Sword Heaven was ready to establish a sect in the seas near the Taizong continent and support Guan at any time. Guan didn't care much about it. He was more concerned about another thing. That was, Xiaochuan's Dao Destruction Destiny Seal had appeared, meaning, Xiaochuan was soon to be born in the celestial spirit great world. After many years, Guan finally awaited Xiaochuan. The thought of soon reuniting with his junior made Guan very happy. He even started humming a tune. Seeing his good mood, Long Qing boldly inquired about the origins of the sword cultivators they had just seen. There will be many opportunities to interact in the future. Guan casually answered, now even more so like an enlightened person, knowing everything but unwilling to say, letting others experience for themselves. Not to mention, this feeling of foreseeing the future and witnessing fate was pretty good. At the same time, among the mountains, a wooden house was situated halfway up the slope, and a couple stood in front of a cliff, gazing at the green mountains and blue waters. The woman held a baby in her arms, looking down at her son with worry visibly covering her beautiful face. She turned to her husband next to her and said, "Husband, you haven't named our child yet, you don't want to go back, do you?" Her husband, dressed in black with slightly grayed temples beside his handsome face, looked mature yet had a sense of vicissitude. "It's precisely because he was born that I must go back, Linger, you should understand. If we don't return, our family of 3 will never have peace. Those enemies will not let me go," the man in black said gravely. His name was Chen Luo, and his wife's name was Su Ling. As they spoke, they moved closer to each other. Su Ling rested her head on his shoulder, confusedly asking, "Is there truly no place for us within the sacred domain? What if we leave the sacred domain?" Chen Luo sighed, "It's more chaotic and dangerous outside. Without a support, even with our Mahayana realm cultivation levels, it's enormously difficult to protect our son. Let's go back. At worst, I will kneel and apologize to my mother. You have given birth to a child for me. She surely won't make things difficult for you." But Su Ling hesitated. Chen Luo turned around, grabbed her shoulders, and said, "Linger, trust me, I would rather die than not protect you and our son. I can't stand to see you hurt, nor do I want our son to be born with resentments." The baby in Su Ling's arms opened his eyes. His bright eyes nearly melted her heart. "Yes, we can't let him bear any resentments," Su Ling murmured to herself as if convincing herself. Chen Luo showed a smile, saying, "When I first saw this little guy, I felt he would bring good fortune. Don't worry, I heard my father just returned from the Saint Minister's side. With him presiding over the family, my mother certainly won't dare to act rashly." Su Ling took a deep breath and nodded slightly. Seeing her agree, Chen Luo finally breathed a sigh of relief, then embraced his wife tightly. "I swear, I will ensure you live a peaceful life, and I will also help you avenge the destruction of your family," Chen Luo said seriously as he stared at the horizon. Su Ling trembled slightly without responding, but slowly closed her eyes. Across the mountains, cranes flew out from the forest, flapping their wings towards the horizon, forming a V-shape. The sunlight fell on them, and they seemed like celestial cranes, as if carrying hope flying towards the ends of the earth and sea. Chapter 473. The Power from Outer Space. After wandering around the outer sect city for half a day, Guan finally returned to the valley as dusk fell. The Blood Prison Great Saint and Long Qing were still discussing matters of the Great Hong Sword Heaven Sword cultivators, and it just so happened that many disciples inside the valley were also discussing it, so they joined the conversation. Perhaps it was because Guan enjoyed chatting, which led to everyone in the Third Medicine Valley loving to idle talk. Even the Ju Luo Sword Monarch would occasionally go to the dojo to play chess and chat, gradually taking on a human flavor. Back in the loft, Guan sat at the table. His mind, however, was on Xiaochuan. He looked and saw Xiaochuan's future life. This life, Xiaochuan was born into better circumstances than the last, with parents and a distinguished family heritage, and his talent was quite good as well. However, the blemish on an otherwise beautiful situation was that Xiaochuan's parents would die when he was young, casting a shadow over his childhood. After the death of his parents, his grandparents still cherished him, providing him with everything, but he always remembered his parents' vengeance. As he grew up, he began investigating the true cause of his parents' death. As a result, he went through many battles and ultimately found out that his grandparents had forced his mother to her death, and, following his father's suicide, he collapsed. In the end, he severed ties with the Chen family and began a wandering life. Even after he became a famous powerhouse, his demeanor remained cold and devoid of smiles. Having waited centuries for Xiaochuan, Guan naturally couldn't bear to see him suffer. He immediately sent a message to Yang Jian, asking the Saint King to sort things out. Now, Yang Jian had restored his status as a Saint King, and his cultivation level was rapidly increasing until he would recover to become a Dao Void Profound Immortal. Because of Gu An's relationship, Yang Jian received great attention from the Holy Court, leading a battlefield, with his reputation spreading far and wide. With Yang Jian making a move, it was enough to smooth out all the troubles Xiaochuan's parents were currently facing. Life is like a game of chess. I hope you can walk out of the board on your own in this life. Guan picked up the fate pen and began to write, scripting a life. Summer passed and autumn arrived. One day, Guan lay on a branch, reading a book, while instructing Zhu Shi in her cultivation. Zhu Shi sat cross-legged under the tree, her hands constantly changing, executing the mental method, her green robe fluttering with her chi force. The book Guan held was the theory of heaven. In recent years, the theory of heaven had first caused a stir, leading countless cultivators to vie for it. The other 8 true scriptures spread all over the world, creating many strong individuals. After obtaining the theory of heaven from Zhu Shi, Guan would study it whenever he had spare time. For hundreds of years before, this theory of heaven hadn't shown any abnormalities. But in the past year, the theory of heaven emitted a strange aura of causality, vague but detectable. Guan felt it carefully. It was a sign, seemingly welcoming the arrival of a certain being. Could it be that the mysterious being who created the theory of heaven was about to come to the celestial spirit great world? Very likely, for sure, the theory of heaven's sudden appearance must have some arrangement within. Following the causality implied by the theory of heaven, the scenes Guan saw kept changing, and he even saw other worlds. Master, this heaven and earth primordial skill is truly powerful. I feel that to completely master it will take many years, and I even feel it's more difficult than the step on Dao Year's step. Zhu Shi raised her head to look at Guan and remarked. She was already at the Mahayana cultivation level, but she had only started receiving Guan's true teaching since after this year. Before, Guan had only pointed out the difficulties in her cultivation. Guan replied, "That's natural. Should you master it, in the future you won't be confined by this world." Hearing this made Zhu's eyes smile grow even brighter. Just as she was about to continue flattering Guan, she saw him suddenly look up into the distance, with a grave expression on his face. "Master, what's wrong?" Zhu Shi asked in astonishment. She rarely saw Guan reveal such an expression, not even when the profound desolate demon god had ravaged the human world. She had never seen Guan frown. Guan replied, "It's nothing." He was looking at the sacred domain where Xiaochuan's parents, Chen Luo and Su Ling, returned to the Chen family and faced difficulties from them, because Su Ling's Su family had once been the Chen family's nemesis. Guan could see the cause and effect. The reason the Su family had been eradicated was that the Chen family had schemed in the shadows, plotting against the Su family, branding them as spies for the immortal dynasty, ultimately leading to their annihilation by the holy court. Su Ling had managed to escape death, all thanks to the protection of Chen Luo. Chen Luo was unaware of this matter, so he was very angry as to why his mother targeted his wife. The couple, holding Xiaochuan, had just returned to the Chen family and faced difficulties, but fortunately, Yang Jian was reliable and arrived in time to defuse the crisis. As a saint king, all members of the Chen family had to bow to Yang Jian. Yang Jian stated that his reason for coming was due to the child in Su Ling's arms whose destiny was extraordinary. There was a transcendent being interested in him, hoping he could live a peaceful life in his early years until that transcendent being came for him. Yang Jian also made it clear to not let the child bear any grudges, to avoid affecting his Dao heart. Hearing this, the face of Chen Luo's mother turned unnatural, but in face of Yang Jian, she still had to force a smile. Guan had foreseen this entire process earlier, but he suddenly looked up because Xiaochuan's fate had changed. After Yang Jian appeared, Xiaochuan's fate had been altered, and Guan also detected a strange force of cause and effect descending on Xiaochuan. This force came from an unknown place, arriving suddenly, and if not for Guan's profound cultivation level, he wouldn't have detected its existence. Even with the protection of the Holy Court's destiny, the great cultivators of the Holy Court did not perceive such a force of cause and effect infiltrating the sacred domain. When he looked again at Xiaochuan's fate, what Guan saw was chaos. In the obscure void, Xiaochuan walked alone, dense fog swirling and obscuring his figure. Whether looking back at the past or toward his future, the scenery was the same. Guan had a bad feeling in his heart. His intervention seemed to offer Xiaochuan a beautiful childhood, but it also made his future uncertain and perplexing. Clearly, someone in the unseen was scheming against Guan, therefore targeting Xiaochuan. Guan guessed that the adversary must be beyond the world gate, unable to cross the barriers set by the celestial spirit god to descend into this universe. Hence, they resorted to using cause and effect to scheme. He fell into deep thought. Seeing that Guan did not wish to say more, she could only hold back her confusion and continue meditating with closed eyes. Meanwhile, in the Chen family's mansion, the great hall was lively and prosperous. Everyone gathered around Su Ling, all eyes on Xiaochuan in her arms. This child is indeed exceptional. His features radiate a saintly aura. Nonsense, otherwise why would the entity behind the Saint King take interest in him? Our Chen family is on the rise. Yes, what is the child's name? I could promise my daughter to him. You wish, the child is destined for the great Tao. Keep your little ideas to yourself. Don't displease that great being by offending the Chen family. The Chen family cultivators kept praising Xiaochuan, and Su Ling's smile never ceased. She felt as if she were in a dream. This was completely different from what she had imagined before arriving, and she could only laugh foolishly. Chen Luo was also bemused, as he was complimenting Yang Jian along with his father and the elders of the house. Yang Jian sat in his chair, sipping tea while observing Xiaochuan, curious as to why his master had taken an interest in the boy. Just then, Su Ling's expression suddenly changed, her mouth opened, her pupils contracted, and her body stiffened. Before the people around her could react, she suddenly dissolved into a pool of blood and spilled to the floor, with Xiaochuan following, dropping towards the ground. Yang Jian appeared out of nowhere, catching Xiaochuan. He looked in horror at the blood beside him, and the great hall instantly fell silent. Chapter 474 Su Ling's shock. Linger. An hysterical roar broke out as Chen Luo pushed through the onlookers. He looked at the blood on the ground, his body trembling, his face filled with utter despair. People around snapped back to their senses and frightened, they retreated. Be on guard. A middle-aged cultivator shouted sternly. He instinctively looked towards Yang Jian. Only a Saint King could have the means to execute Su Ling directly in their presence. Yang Jian looked up, his divine sense rapidly extending, but failed to capture any suspicious presence. Chen Luo knelt in front of the blood, unable to accept the reality before him. Just a moment ago, he had felt like the happiest man in the world, but now he felt as though he had fallen into hell. Xiaochuan in Yang Jian's arms seemed to feel something too and began to cry loudly, but Chen Luo could no longer pay attention to him. The patriarch of the Chen family approached Yang Jian and asked with a frown, Saint King, what's going on? Although he did not like Su Ling, she was, after all, a descendant of the Su family. Her death in front of them, if spread, would tarnish the Chen family's reputation. I'm not sure either, it's truly strange, Yang Jian answered, passing Xiaochuan to the patriarch of the Chen family before vanishing on the spot. The rest of the Chen family regained their senses and promptly stepped out of the hall to be on guard. Chen Luo suddenly looked up at the patriarch of the Chen family, pleading desperately, Father, save Linger. Save her. The patriarch took a deep breath and said, Her soul has dispersed, it's beyond salvation. He was also filled with fear. If it wasn't the Saint King, then what exactly had happened? Su Ling's death was too bizarre, shocking not only Chen Luo but also them. At this moment, what the patriarch of the Chen family feared the most was Chen Luo also meeting with an accident, but he was helpless. He didn't even dare to approach Chen Luo, afraid that he too might suffer a calamity. Guan, far away at the Supreme Sect, witnessed all this. Everything happened too quickly. In an instant, he captured Su Ling's soul, using his own power of cause and effect to protect her soul and prevent it from being ravaged by mysterious forces of cause and effect. If that mysterious existence could execute Su Ling, couldn't it also kill others? This was Gu An's greatest concern, which is why he hid Su Ling's soul. He couldn't always keep an eye on Su Ling. Fortunately, nothing further happened, only Su Ling died. Yang Jian returned to the Chen estate and gathered with the Chen family to discuss the death of Su Ling. Suddenly, Chen Luo severed his own meridians, destroying his golden core, intending to disperse his soul. Yang Jian immediately intervened, but Chen Luo was still left a cripple. Seeing this, Guan also felt some emotion. His intervention saved Chen Luo and Su Ling, but it brought them another kind of disaster. He suddenly felt confused. If the mastermind was targeting him, why go after Su Ling and not those close to him? Many of those he cared about had a cultivation level below the Mahayana realm. Could it be that the mastermind wanted Xiaochuan to tread an irredeemable path and lure Guan away from this universe? While protecting Su Ling's soul, Guan could feel the power of that cause and effect, not as strong as his, but certainly coming from another universe. Without crossing universes, it was difficult to assess which was stronger or weaker. Guan stood up, descended from the tree, and looked toward Zhu Shi. Continue your cultivation. I have some things to attend to. With those words, Guan vanished on the spot. He stepped into the hidden spirit palace located at the bottom of the sea. The deep sea dragon carp, in the midst of cultivation, did not sense Guan's arrival. Guan raised his right hand and released Su Ling's soul, then used nature's spiritual energy to reconstruct her flesh. Su Ling had a long lifespan ahead. As long as her allotted lifespan had not ended, she could regroup her flesh, an easy feat for Guan. The challenge lay in transcending ordained fates. Su Ling's flesh was reconstructed, along with her clothing, just as she appeared right before her death. The deep-sea dragon carp sensed her breath, opened its eyes, and upon seeing its master, it stood up in surprise, hurrying over. Su Ling, as if she had woken from a nightmare, sat on the ground, breathing heavily, her head covered in sweat. She looked up to see Guan, looking as handsome as an immortal god from paintings, her eyes full of fear. You needn't worry, I won't harm you, but you can no longer return. A power beyond the 9 heavens of the immortal path wants to harm your son, thus they killed you. From now on, you'll cultivate here. In time, they'll bring your husband here. Later, you'll manage Medicine Valley for me, and one day, you 3 will be reunited, Guan said before disappearing, leaving Su Ling, a Mahayana cultivator, to rapidly come to terms with reality. A replacement had already been placed inside the hidden spirit palace, now possessing the cultivation level of the heaven-encompassing free immortal. Here, the power of cause and effect from outside the universe could hardly harm Su Ling, and it would not even detect her whereabouts. Upon hearing Guan's words, Su Ling was left stunned, her eyes vacant. The deep-sea dragon carp stood to one side, touching its head, unsure of how to strike up a conversation. It was also pondering Guan's previous words. An existence surpassing the 9 heavens of the immortal path? And who is this woman's son? Silence fell upon the hidden spirit palace. After a while, Su Ling took a deep breath, stood up, and bowed to the deep-sea dragon carp, asking, "My name is Su Ling. May I know how to address you, and could you introduce me to this place and the senior who was here just now?" Her heart was shocked. What level of cultivation would someone who can casually mention beings beyond the 9 heavens of the immortal path possess? Young lady? Upon hearing this, the deep-sea dragon carp's face revealed a gentle smile, which warmed Su Ling's heart and made her feel a sense of closeness to him. Late at night, Chen Luo, with his hair disheveled, sat in a chair, his eyes empty. His mother was holding Xiaochuan, trying to comfort him, hoping he could come to terms with his situation, but unfortunately, he was not at all receptive. It was then that Yang Jian walked into the room and said to Chen Luo, "There is still hope for your wife to be alive." Upon hearing this, Chen Luo's head shot up. He immediately rushed toward Yang Jian, grabbed his arms, and asked urgently, "Really? What should I do? What do you need from me?" Yang Jian, with a serene expression, said, "Go to the supreme sect in the Taizong continent, and you will know what to do." As soon as he heard this, Chen Luo let go and ran straight for the door. Chen Luo's mother wanted to call out to him, but Yang Jian stopped her, suggesting with significant meaning, "He has now lost all his cultivation, which is a good opportunity to temper him. Let him go to the supreme sect on his own. Do not assist him." Chen Luo's mother hesitated and asked, "Is it the supreme sect where the supporting Dao sword venerable is?" Yang Jian nodded slightly, and Chen Luo's mother immediately breathed a sigh of relief, even showing a hint of surprise in her eyes. The name of the supporting Tao Sword Venerable was one she had heard of, the saint who saved all living beings. Such an existence would not plot against her son. She couldn't help but look down at her grandson in her arms, wondering to herself, "My dear grandson, who exactly are you reincarnated from, that even the supporting Tao Sword Venerable would protect you?" Those who practice immortal cultivation always believe in past and present lives. Knowing that her grandson had a past life, she did not reject the idea. Instead, she liked him even more. Perhaps this grandson would bring a prosperous opportunity to the Chen family. It was winter, and snowflakes were fluttering down. Gu En stood on the tower watching the snow. Since Su Ling's mishap, he had always been watching over Xiaochuan. Fortunately, that force of cause and effect hadn't caused any trouble again. But in fact, the existence behind the scenes had succeeded. He had made Xiaochuan return to a state without his parents. This gave Gu En some inspiration. The power of cause and effect could actually transcend the universe. He decided that from now on, his main focus would be to research the power of cause and effect and strengthen his own way of cause and effect. In the previous years, he had been perceiving different Tao rules. Now, thinking about it, it seemed better to develop one particular Tao to its extreme first. He saw Chen Luo alone in a boat, in the boundless vast sea. The small boat that Chen Luo was on was like a fallen leaf in the vast sea, which could be submerged at any time. Although Gu En wanted to temper Chen Luo's character, he hadn't actually left Chen Luo to face the journey alone. After all, Chen Luo had no cultivation level. All along the way, Gu En had already helped Chen Luo deal with many troubles he could not contend with. The rest of the journey would have to rely on his willpower. Yang Jian had already left the Qin family. Before departing, the head of the Qin family hoped that Yang Jian would bestow a name. Yang Jian hesitated quite a bit, but fortunately, he received a transmission from his master. Qin Chuan. That was the name for Xiaochuan in this life. It was quite ordinary, but coming from the mouth of Yang Jian, it gave the Qin family even more hope. Did the Saint King hope for this child to be as unyielding and persistent as the mountains and rivers? Su Ling stayed in the hidden spirit palace, getting along very well with the deep-sea dragon carp and proclaiming each other as sisters. She had not noticed that the dragon carp was a male demon, considering the dragon carp's cultivation level was a bit higher than hers. Life returned to calm once again. The cause and effect of Xiaochuan did not trouble Gu En. Instead, it was like a game of strategy. When he became strong enough, he would certainly drag out the existence behind the scenes. He even considered using the power of cause and effect to annihilate the other party across the universe in the future. Chapter 475. The Auspicious Celestial Horse, the book that governs life and death, Gu En. A woman's voice came from downstairs, interrupting Gu En's train of thought. He looked down to see Yu Yingying standing below, waving at him. Yu Yingying's maximum lifespan was 5,000 years. Previously, because of the suppression by the heavenly demon's karma, her cultivation level couldn't grow. After Gu En helped her resolve the karma, she regained her inherent talent, and now her cultivation level had reached the 8th floor of the integration realm. Gu En looked down at her and asked, "What's up?" Yu Yingying looked at him and said, "I'm getting ready to go back to the Star Sea congregations." "Just go, I've agreed," Gu En replied with a smile. Ever since Gu An's identity had been exposed, various sects had been trying to curry favor with him, including the Star Sea congregations, and particularly Yu Yingying's family, who constantly sent her messages. She was quite irritated by this, so she decided to leave the Supreme Sect and go out on her own to experience the world. Returning to the Star Sea congregations was just a pretext. She planned to wander the endless lands. Gu En certainly wouldn't stop her. Hearing Gu An's words, Yu Yingying hesitated. Looking up at Gu En from downstairs, she felt that he was out of reach, and her heart found some relief. Since she was already prepared, why hesitate now? Gu En could hear her heart's voice but didn't say anything, just smiling as he watched her. "When I attain the cultivation level of the immortal Tao, I will come back." Yu Yingying huffed, and with that she bowed and left. Next to them, Blood Prison Great Saint, who was meditating under a tree, just glanced over before closing his eyes again to continue his cultivation. Guan watched Yu Yingying leave, feeling somewhat sentimental. No matter how much he behaved like before, the disparity in cultivation level always created an insurmountable barrier between him and the others. They were still as close as they had been, but compared to before, something was missing. Perhaps that was the price of becoming strong. Guan shifted his gaze back to appreciate the snowy landscape of Medicine Valley. It snowed every year, and if one observed carefully, they would realize that the snowscape was different every year, like the intricate, interwoven karma of all beings, constantly changing. Guan recently had been contemplating creating his own divine power, a karma divine power, to kill enemies across space and time, making them unable to deduce his actions. Just like this winter snow, that would eventually melt, leaving no trace. After saying farewell to an Exin, Long Qin, and the others, Yu Yingying left that very day. Her departure sparked some discussion among the disciples, but in the end, it didn't cause much of a stir in the Third Medicine Valley. Nowadays, the Third Medicine Valley had 7,000 disciples, along with many chess and painting enthusiasts, almost like a miniature immortal cultivation realm on its own. People were always coming and going, and Yu Yingying, even in this small realm, couldn't shine brightly. Her departure was destined to be forgotten quickly. The winter's snow fell heavier by the minute, as if aiming to bury the vast earth itself. After the winter's snow passed, spring arrived. For this year's spring festival, Guan left the valley early. He went to the world-excluding cave heaven to celebrate with the celestial demon child and her companions. In the past, he hadn't forgotten them, but celebrating with them had always happened after the spring festival. Guan sat under a tree, drinking, with the celestial demon child peeling fruit for him. They laughed together, watching Celestial Cyan and Tian Bai perform, reenacting the battle between Sun Wukong and Erlang God, complete with dialogue. Watching their performance, Guan felt they hadn't changed at all, and now reflecting on it, perhaps not all experience was beneficial. Of course, whether to gain experience or not was up to their choice. After Celestial Cyan and Tian Bai finished their performance, the celestial demon child took the stage, showing off her divine skills. Even without Guan speaking, the three women could keep chattering non-stop, keeping the atmosphere warm and engaged. Guan's heart grew more serene as he watched the celestial demon child, while contemplating his way of cause and effect. The way of cause and effect was something all cultivators were involved with. It was the simplest yet the hardest, which is why many practitioners, as their realms advanced, would research other great Daos. The same way of cause and effect, what made Guan's path different from other practitioners? After so many lifespans and rebirths, Guan's accumulation of knowledge on the way of cause and effect was deep. What he lacked was creation. His Tao fruit had nurtured a path unique to him, and he had created his own great divine power exclusive to him, the longevity true words. Longevity true words, using language to determine fate, made use of the way of cause and effect. Guan looked at the fate pen on the table. He had a pen that could utter the words of karma. Did he really need a book too? Speaking of which, in his life, he had an inseparable destiny with writing books. He had written many books, some where he copied classical Huaxia texts, and some he created himself. If he could write the way of cause and effect into the books, would it be feasible? Guan suddenly thought of the Book of Life and Death from Journey to the West. With one stroke in the Book of Life and Death, one could determine life and death. His ideas began to burst forth, slowly entering meditation. After a while, the merry celestial demon child, Celestial Cyan, and Tian Bai suddenly sensed Guan's Tao intent. They turned their heads to look at Guan, their eyes filled with astonishment. Not daring to disturb Guan, they exchanged glances and then sat down to meditate, feeling Guan's Tao intent. The world-excluding cave heaven followed suit and quieted down. Under the dazzling starry sky, on the barren land, wavering shadows were moving forward. Leading the group were two men, namely the divine exotic realm master and Zhang Buku. Zhang Buku was dressed in a set of worn black clothes, which loosely revealed his robust muscles, quite striking to the eye. His black hair was carelessly draped down his back. Looking up, his eyes bright and clear, he asked, "Master, how far are we from the celestial spirit great world?" The divine exotic realm master replied, "Very far, so far that I can no longer sense the power of divine exotic city. To have come to this place is our fortune, perhaps we should let go of the past." After leaving the celestial spirit great world, they had been traversing the great heaven and earth non-stop until a few years ago when they were swept into the darkness by a river filled with the rules of space and time, completely severing their connection with the celestial spirit great world. Upon hearing this, a look of sadness crossed Zhang Buku's face. He missed his martial uncle, longed for Liya. But he was no longer that weak self. Wherever he went, he had to fight to become stronger. Suddenly, he saw meteors streaking across the starry sky like torrential rain, sweeping across the entire starry sky, a magnificent sight. Immediately after, he was struck by an awe-inspiring scene. A colossal celestial horse flashing brilliant light emerged behind the countless meteors, stepping on auspicious clouds, crossing the land they were on. Under this colossal celestial horse, no matter how high their cultivation level, all would feel extremely insignificant, and the dark land was lit up as if moving from nighttime to daylight. The divine exotic ghost king and the divine exotic resentful ghosts behind them were also startled, causing an uproar. "What is that?" Zhang Buku couldn't help asking the divine exotic realm master. The divine exotic realm master, living the longest, could always solve his puzzles. The divine exotic realm master looked at the cloud-striding, bright celestial horse with a complicated gaze and said, "That symbolizes the auspiciousness of the heavenly Tao. You can call it a celestial horse. They are supreme, being able to cross yin and yang, across all heavens and myriad realms. It is said that all beings who see the celestial horse will gain the blessing of destiny. It seems our luck isn't bad." Celestial horse? Zhang Buku murmured to himself. Although he had seen many and was well informed about divine beasts and fierce beasts, he had never seen an auspicious being like the celestial horse. The celestial horse was so majestic that it seemed even larger than heaven and earth, radiating a holy light that made people yearn for it, as if it was the most perfect creation in the world. Even after the celestial horse following the meteor swarm had disappeared, and the land had fallen back into darkness, the graceful figure still lingered in Zhang Buku's mind. What kind of existence could subdue such an auspicious being? Zhang Buku had this thought, and immediately after he felt ashamed. How could one defile such an auspicious being? He shook his head and carried on. The divine exotic resentful ghosts continued to discuss the celestial horse, feeling amazed and unforgettable. The divine exotic realm master walked ahead, saying, "Perhaps there is an incredible fortune waiting for us ahead. The celestial horse is a sign." A smile appeared on his face. Since coming to this universe, he had finally seen hope to shake off the role of a chess piece. Zhang Buku didn't think so much. He just wanted to become stronger. If martial uncle and Liya could see the celestial horse, how good that would be. Unfortunately, you're not so lucky. Thinking to himself, Zhang Buku amused himself with the thought. The starry sky was brilliant, unable to illuminate the land, but they pressed on through the darkness towards the dawn. In the third Medicine Valley, at the entrance of Medicine Valley, Guan strolled forward, toying with a black leather book in his hand. He flung the black leather book into the air, caught it again, and continued to playfully advance. "Master!" A voice full of surprise called out, and an Exen appeared out of nowhere in front of him. Guan smoothly caught the flying black leather book and tucked it into his bosom. This was a book that governed life and death. It was not something others could touch. The cover showed black scale armor patterns which felt textured, mysterious, and bizarre, quite unsettling to behold. Because it was a cause and effect treasure, Guan had purposely fashioned an imposing appearance for it. Different from the Immortal Path Ultimate Treasure, the fate pen. This treasure was shaped by the Tao intent of the heaven-encompassing free immortal. Its tier was higher, and having just taken shape, it could still grow. It needed Guan to continuously nourish it with the way of cause and effect. Now, what Guan needed to do was to inscribe it with a name. What name should I give it? Guan fell into deep thought. His right hand rested on the desk, fingers lightly tapping the surface. It wasn't until the sunlight outside gradually reddened that he finally came up with an idea. He picked up the fate pen and began to write on the black book. Infinite. When the final stroke was drawn, the 4 characters burst into golden light and began to sear the cover, then sank in, forming golden letters. Infinite Sword Book. Guan thought of his primordial infinite body and the power of infinity, and he intended the book to embody limitless potential, omnipotence. The reason it included the word sword was that he did not want to forsake his sword Tao. He wanted to combine his sword Tao with the power of cause and effect to create a sword Tao of cause and effect capable of slashing through universes. The Infinite Sword Book began to tremble, then floated in the air, absorbing the power of cause and effect from heaven and earth. In an instant, all the cause and effect within the Tai Tsong continent shone within it. Its range extended farther and wider until the entire celestial spirit great world was reflected within it. Every being who had reached the realm of a free immortal felt a sudden palpitation, but when they opened their eyes, they saw nothing out of the ordinary, nor could they discern any cause and effect. Inside a hall shrouded in clouds and mist, the Saint Minister sat cross-legged on the steps, below which there was a pond, its surface a shimmering blue, fantastically beautiful, with faint starlight twinkling within. The Saint Minister opened his eyes, frowning. He started calculating with his fingers but could figure nothing out. The end of the era, the rules recede, it truly becomes all the more dangerous. The Saint Minister muttered to himself, feeling immense pressure just thinking about the situation now. Recently, many mysterious forces had appeared outside of heaven, attacking the silent extinction domain. Within heaven as well there were quite a few indeterminate free immortals. And then there was the supporting Tao Sword Venerable who could easily annihilate the entire celestial spirit great world. As a Saint Minister of the Holy Court, he greatly disliked this feeling of being unable to control the situation. It left him feeling powerless and even unable to see hope. Could it be that the fate of Holy Court was running out, just like the dominators of the worlds in the vast stretches of time that had passed away? The Saint Minister sank into confusion. In a daze, he saw a figure approaching from the far end of the great hall. "Your Majesty," the Saint Minister spoke to himself, as if in a dream. When the free immortals of the world felt panic, the common people did not notice anything unusual. The Holy Court and Immortal Dynasty still fought as always, but compared to several hundred years ago, mortal spirits were seldom affected, so there were still many places of peace in the world. The next day at dawn, Guan descended the stairs, joining his disciples for a rare session of drill practice. Having been gone for a year, he would be busy harvesting medicinal herbs for the next few days. Half an hour later, Guan rode away on the blood prison Great Saint, preparing to head for the end of the world valley. Just as he left the supreme sect, a figure appeared before them. It was Zhu Luo Sword Monarch. Zhu Luo Sword Monarch inhaled deeply as he looked at Guan, saying, "Senior, there is something I must tell you. Did you feel anything unusual yesterday?" Guan feigned confusion and asked, "I did not. What is it you want to talk to me about?" Years ago, a sword intent appeared briefly within the silent extinction domain. I was just surprised at the time, but over the years, I've discussed this sword intent with my sectmates, and we've learned something very frightening, said Zhu Luo Sword Monarch with a solemn expression. Communicating through sword intent? Was it to avoid being traced? Great Hong Sword Heaven had something up its sleeve. Guan pondered while pressing for more information. What is it exactly? The blood prison Great Saint, who had taken on the form of a bull, also showed a curious expression. He knew Zhu Luo Sword Monarch's cultivation level was profound, so he never provoked him. Zhu Luo Sword Monarch hesitated for a moment before saying, "This matter involves the secrets of Great Hong Sword Heaven. The primordial ancestor who created the Great Hong Sword Heaven is hailed as the Sword God by the Great Hong realm. He is also the only true disciple of the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor, the only being who has ever defeated the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor. After the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor's fall, his temperament changed drastically. To enhance the Sword Dao, he started to take extreme measures, madly devouring Sword Intent and Sword Dao, rapidly growing stronger, and even at one point became a public enemy of the universe, provoking several great worlds to join forces against him. He has disappeared for many years, his life and death unknown. The Sword Intent that flashed past years ago was very complex. It made me feel disorderly, terrifying, and agitated. Only his Sword Intent could match, and yesterday, I and my sectmates, the Free Immortals, all felt a quiver in our hearts, suspecting that the Sword God might have reappeared in the world. He might even be targeting you. With that, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch looked at Gu In with a tense expression. This kid feared neither heaven nor earth. It was the first time Gu In had seen him so wary of someone, even more so than of the battle court. Gu In asked, compared to the Divine Emperor of the Silent Extinction Domain, how does the Sword God of your great Hong Sword Heaven measure up? Zhu Luo Sword Monarch had mentioned the Sword Intent, which Gu In had also felt. It was very fierce and disappeared quickly, likely having entered into the River of Sword Dao. The River of Sword Dao is a manifestation of the rules, residing on another plane, independent of the universe. He had not expected that the master of that Sword Intent was the Sword God, Yang Pingon. If what Zhu Luo Sword Monarch said was true, then it was indeed a possibility, because Gu In had also sensed that the Sword Intent was very complex, even carrying a hint of demonic possession. Zhu Luo Sword Monarch shook his head, saying, "How could I know such comparisons? It's beyond my level." Gu In laughed, saying, "All right, I am aware now, you may step aside." Hearing this, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch hurriedly made way. The Blood Prison Great Saint lifted his hooves, marching forward. Zhu Luo Sword Monarch watched as Gu In's figure receded into the distance. Seeing his nonchalant demeanor, he became even more convinced that Gu In was the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor. The legend says the Sword God defeated the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor, but how can the Saint Ancestor not take the Sword God seriously? Could the stories be fabricated? Zhu Luo Sword Monarch secretly contemplated, feeling it was very likely. After all, it was the Sword God who founded the Great Hong Sword Heaven, not the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor. The successive sword masters of Great Hong Sword Heaven naturally wished for it to be the strongest, so they would intentionally exalt their founding teacher. The thought that the Sword God and the Sword Dao Saint Ancestor might duel again dispelled Zhu Luo Sword Monarch's nervousness, replaced instead by excitement. Chapter 477, 150 billion years lifespan. Gu In heard Zhu Luo Sword Monarch's inner voice behind him, and his lips curled up. A decisive battle with Yang Pingon? Had Yang Pingon not taken advantage of his injury years ago, how could he have won a match against him? Throughout Yang Xian's life, as long as the enemy was not 2 great realms higher than him, he had never been defeated. Only after they walked far away did Blood Prison Great Saint finally couldn't help but inquire about the Sword God mentioned by Zhu Luo Sword Monarch. He felt sure his master knew everything and was omniscient, merely pretending not to reveal the secrets of heaven. His master was an existence that stood above the 9 heavens of the immortal path. Being called a Sword God naturally means he is formidable. Look at our celestial spirit great world. Do we have a recognized Sword God? Sitting on the back of Blood Prison Great Saint, Gu In casually responded, then he took out the Infinite Sword Book, ready to ponder the divine skills of Sword Dao. The Sword Dao is hidden in the book, with thoughts that kill the enemy. The targeted enemy will face a sword directly, unable to dodge, unable to endure, unable to deduce. This was Gu In's concept for the Infinite Sword Book. The specific sword techniques still needed careful consideration. He was not in a hurry, he had plenty of time to think about Sword Dao. Hearing Gu In's words, Blood Prison Great Saint fell into endless reverie, feeling he needed to remake his Great Saint reputation. At the very least, he wanted all living beings to admire him, rather than proclaiming himself as the Great Saint. 10 years later, in the sacred domain, In the Chen family mansion, 12-year-old Chen Chuan was practicing swordsmanship. Dressed in white robe and black trousers, his black hair tied high at the back of his head, he already possessed a handsome countenance despite his young age. The patriarch of the Chen family, Chen Xiong, stood on the stone steps, his left hand behind his back, his right hand in front, holding 2 jade stones. He watched Chen Chuan's posture with a face full of relief and indulgence. Chen Chuan had shown extraordinary talent since he was a child. Without anyone teaching him the cultivation technique, he was able to cultivate spiritual power on his own, which had shocked the entire Chen family. Furthermore, with the existence backing the Saint King also supporting Chen Chuan, he had become the Chen family's biggest pride and hope. Yang Jian had 2 great beings behind him. Whether it was the Saint Minister or supporting Dao Sword Venerable, they were beings the Chen family looked up to unattainably high. The kid is growing up fast. Chen Xiong stared at Chen Chuan, feeling emotional inside. Unbeknownst to them, someone was perched on the eave of the nearby roof, watching them. It was Guan. At that moment, even the free immortal standing in front of him wouldn't have been able to detect his presence. Watching Chen Chuan's life, Guan thought about the time Xiao Chuan was with his grandson. Xiao Chuan was smiling then, saying how great it would be to be such a good grandfather. Now you fulfilled that dream, Guan said with a smile on his face. He also heard Chen Chuan's heartfelt ambition. This youngster was even more ambitious than in his previous life. In that case, as your senior brother, I will fulfill your wish, since you have also devoted a lifetime to me. Guan raised his right hand and waved his sleeve toward Chen Chuan. In an instant, a stream of Dao intent transformed into a gentle breeze that blew towards Chen Chuan, causing his black hair to flutter and his white robe to billow. Chen Chuan's eyes widened, and he seemed somewhat dazed. Noticing his grandson's unusual behavior, Chen Xiong couldn't help but ask, "Grandson, what's wrong?" Chen Chuan subconsciously replied, "Nothing, I just had a new insight." "Really?" Then continue pondering, "Grandpa shouldn't disturb your cultivation." Chen Xiong hastily moved aside. Seeing this, Chen Chuan immediately closed his eyes and immersed himself in his own insights. Chen Xiong stepped back 10 paces watching him, and he too seemed somewhat dazed. In Chen Xiong's eyes, the sunlight on Chen Chuan's body became even brighter, like the legendary immortals, on the brink of ascension at any moment. Guan was still standing on the roof, looking down at Chen Chuan. Suddenly, Sword Gu Ming harbors hostility towards you, filled with the intent to kill. Would you like to employ lifespan detection? Guan raised an eyebrow. Usually, he would trigger life expectancy predictions since he met many people, but they were almost all merely displeased. It had been a long time since someone wanted to kill him. Interesting. He immediately chose to employ lifespan detection. Sword Gu Ming, midstage in Zizai Immortal Realm 318,726,309/15 billion/15 billion, 15 billion years lifespan? Xian Tian Free Immortal. Gu Ennis divine sense swept across the universe in an instant, not capturing the Xian Tian Free Immortal. Silent Extinction Domain indeed had free immortals, but they could be counted on one hand, all secluded from the world. Could this person be from outside the universe? Guan pondered briefly, then Flash stepped back to the hidden spirit palace. The moment he landed, he pulled out the Infinite Sword book from his bosom. Chapter 478. A Sword. Guan held the Infinite Sword book and walked to his usual rocking chair. When he appeared, Su Ling, who had been meditating next to the garden, immediately stood up and saluted him. The deep-sea dragon carp, more audacious, had grown familiar with Guan and approached him curiously, asking, "The Infinite Sword book? What is this book?" Guan answered nonchalantly, "It's a forbidden book, don't look at it. Hurry up and go practice, and don't delay me from reading." Seeing his master was not as gentle as usual, the deep-sea dragon carp quickly scurried away. Guan then took out the fate pen. With one hand, he flipped open the Infinite Sword book, and with the other, he held the pen, its tip against the page. This was his first time utilizing the Infinite Sword Book, his heart filled with anticipation. The enemy might come from beyond the cosmos. He didn't know if he could slay it. And if he did, could he gain lifespan? He stopped contemplating these thoughts and focused on channeling the power of karma into the Infinite Sword Book. In the cosmos, countless nebulae speckled the expanse, some like running giants, some like the palms of a creator, others resembled mysterious fierce beasts, colorful and bizarre, everything looking fantastically alien. A streak of sword light sped through the cosmos carrying two figures, one a vigorous man clad in purple and standing tall, the other an old, hunched man with a back bent by time. The man in purple had a crystal crown on his head, his brows emanating sharpness, and his eyes reflecting two swords, adding an oppressive air to his gaze. The old man beside him, shorter than his shoulder, held a wooden staff, his cheeks dotted with age spots, two antler-like tufts of white hair among his mane, reminiscent of deer antlers. "Master, are you really going to act on behalf of the Divine Emperor? A being the Divine Emperor cannot deal with is likely not so simple," the old man with antlers said, frowning with worry in his eyes. The man in purple was Sword Gu. He replied, "If it were so simple, the Divine Emperor wouldn't have sought me out. Indeed, his status does not permit him to pass through the world gate. If I wish to step into higher realms, I must rely on him. I can already feel my own limits. Though I can live many more years, nearly immortal, I feel I cannot reach higher realms." The old man with the antlers fell silent. He too wished for his master to grow stronger, yet the thought of venturing into that part of the cosmos filled him with unease. As long as the opponent doesn't surpass the profound Yuan-free immortal, it cannot be my match. If they were truly that formidable, the celestial spirit god would not allow such a being to continue growing, Sword Gu continued, his voice calm. Chapter 479, Battling Against the Heavens. After entering the hidden spirit palace, Guin flashed to the center of the grand hall and sat down to meditate, beginning to cultivate energy. He felt a strange power trying to harm him. It was somewhat like the way of cause and effect, but more terrifying than that. Guin used his own power of the way of cause and effect to resist, but he couldn't neutralize this eerie force quickly. As time passed, Guin gradually understood this eerie force. It was karma retribution. It seemed that there was some power in the cosmos maintaining balance over those who used the way of cause and effect to prevent the collapse of order. Though the way of cause and effect is one of the 3,000 great Tao, it has the ability to influence all Tao, involving time, reincarnation, life and death, and so on. A small change in cause and effect could overturn the past. Without suppression, the way of cause and effect would be tantamount to the strongest Tao. But in fact, the 3,000 great Tao are all equal, with no distinctions of strong or weak, depending only on the cultivator's achievement in their respective Tao. The stronger the force of cause and effect used, the greater the karma retribution suffered. Guin opened his eyes and pulled up his attribute panel to check. He found that his lifespan was decreasing, yet his lifespan had already been the number he had seized, which was now 54 billion years. While cultivating energy, he waited. Karma retribution couldn't possibly deduct his 14 billion years of lifespan, could it? If so, then this was equivalent to no lifespan stolen at all. Worse, not only had he not gained lifespan, but he had also lost it. Guin furrowed his brows, but fortunately after a short while, the speed at which the lifespan numbers jumped began to slow. After the time of one stick of incense had passed, his lifespan no longer decreased. He had lost a total of 2 billion years of lifespan, which meant that he still gained 12 billion years of lifespan. That was a huge profit. Guin exhaled in relief. He raised his right hand, looked at his palm, and saw black lines emerge, like the creepy wounds of poisoning. He had withstood the karma retribution, but these remaining traces still required time to erase. For the time being, his strength hadn't been damaged, only leaving the short-term indelible marks of cause and effect, which was no significant trouble. But having just used the Infinite Sword Book and encountered such retribution, what about the future? Guan felt the need to continue improving the Infinite Sword Book, to enhance its power of cause and effect so that one day he could escape karma retribution. Regardless, this time not only had he eliminated a hidden danger, but he had also gained 10 billion years of lifespan, making it a double blessing. Guan adjusted his emotions and looked back at the Infinite Sword Book. In the process of using the Infinite Sword Book, Guan also saw Sword Gu Ming and the Antlered Elder through the Sword of Cause and Effect, but he couldn't deduce their causality through this perspective anymore. Under the starry sky, before the celestial Tao Golden Core, and Hao and the young immortal emperors sat side by side in meditation, each cultivating their energy. Suddenly, the young immortal emperor opened his eyes, furrowing his brow, and sharply turned to look at the celestial Tao Golden Core. The celestial Tao Golden Core was still burning fiercely, appearing mystical and powerful, with its surface flames resembling the laws of the operation of all things, continuously renewing, displaying various great Tao on it. And Hao, sensing his movement, also opened his eyes to look at him, asking curiously, "What's wrong?" The young immortal emperor stared at the celestial Tao Golden Core and said, "Suddenly, one great disaster lessened in the world." "It's strange, but indeed so." "One great disaster lessened? What did you see before?" And Hao grew more curious. "While contemplating the celestial Tao Golden Core, I saw the future, where a river hung in the heavens for all living beings to see. This river, manifested by the Sword Tao, would bring a cataclysm to annihilate heaven and earth." The young immortal emperor replied, his thoughts drifting back, narrating with a tone filled with certain feelings that made Hao visualize the scene depicted in his words. And Hao couldn't help but ask, "So, such a calamity suddenly disappeared, could it be that a great power has changed the destiny of great heaven and earth? Does that mean the celestial spirit great world will be peaceful from now on and no longer chaotic?" The young immortal emperor snorted, "Do you really think the tribulations of the world stem from the ambition of some powerful being? It's not so. Whether it's the immortal dynasty or the holy court, destiny is shrinking. Only by devouring the destiny of the other can one preserve the Taoist lineage. This is the will of great heaven and earth at play, continuously unleashing cause and effect, forcing catastrophe after catastrophe to come." He turned back, took a deep breath, and said, "When this great disaster ends, a new one will begin. There's only one way to put a complete stop to it." "What way?" And Hao asked with a frown. He disliked this kind of predestined fate, as it made him feel that his talent was a gift from heaven, and that the Tao practice he cultivated was also chosen by the will of great heaven and earth. Everything seemed to lose its meaning. The young immortal emperor replied, "That is for the immortal dynasty and holy court to become one, with the victor annihilating 99% of all living beings, reducing the vitality of great heaven and earth to the extreme, reshaping the rules of heaven and earth, whereafter the will of heaven and earth will naturally subside." And Hao's face changed dramatically. 99% of all living beings must die? Such a will of heaven and earth contradicted his fantasy. At that time, such a situation would be against the righteous Tao, and the victor would hardly be at ease. No one wants to slaughter all living beings, so the immortal dynasty and holy court decided to fight to the death, also reducing the number of each other's beings, said the young immortal emperor, his expression indifferent as if devoid of any emotion. And Hao's brow furrowed deeper. He thought of another matter, asking, could the invasion from outer heaven become an unpredictable factor? Don't let the outer heaven power have the last laugh. The young immortal emperor scoffed. They are mere bandits. If their ambition becomes too great, they will only perish along with their Tao. And Hao wished he could say that hundreds of years ago, if not for his master, we would all have died or been taken over by the heavenly demon. But then he thought again, perhaps his master's intervention was a part of the will of great heaven and earth, or if not his master, then some other powerful being would have intervened. His master was so powerful, why would he remain in the celestial spirit great world? Could it be that his master represents the will of great heaven and earth? And Hao reached this conclusion and suddenly felt an epiphany. Wandering the world for so many years, he had a good understanding of history, knowing that an era of peace had lasted countless years and the current upheaval was a rarity in a million years. The supporting Tao sword venerable had appeared only a little over 1,000 years ago, after the disappearance of Shengtian. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed to make sense, as if he had seen through the truths of the world. Wait, if his master represented the heavenly Tao, then his master choosing him. And Hao's eyes changed as he entered a mysterious state. The young immortal emperor, sensing this change, could only lament inwardly that the heavenly Tao was unjust. Rather than envy in Hao, he was more curious as to why the calamity had vanished. In his peering, that calamity was more desperate than any past disasters, and he could not forget the figure of Sword Guming. That figure was even more terrifying than the profound desolate demon god or the silent destruction god emperor. What kind of being is contending from behind the scenes? Is this a battle against heaven? Can one really win against heaven? The young immortal emperor mused silently, then looked back at Hao. Chapter 480. Pillar of the Human World, the so-called immortal cultivation true immortal inheritance? Guan guessed it was very likely to be true. He thought about the inheritance that LV Xian gave him, which included the inheritance of the celestial Tao immortal position. And the ultimate extreme in one's life was also due to the refusal of the position among the immortal gods, which led to the demise of one's body and the extinguishment of their path. Is the theory of heaven influenced by the meddling of immortal gods? Even reaching the Tao fruit realm, it is hard to catch a glimpse of an immortal god. They are ethereal, and seldom are there rumors of them in the cosmos. Blood Prison Great Saint and an Exon began discussing the theory of heaven and the true immortal inheritance. For cultivators, the immortal gods possessed an irresistible allure. Isn't the purpose of immortal cultivation to ascend to immortality? Once, it was believed that the immortal dynasty was the ultimate goal, but later it was discovered that they were merely beings who had reached the immortal Tao realm. The true immortal gods are beyond imagination. Guan was also curious about the nature of the force to which the immortal gods belonged. What immense entity was it? However, he didn't intend to delve into the true immortal inheritance for the time being. If he touched upon cause and effect, even if he refused to ascend to immortality, he would encounter endless troubles. This news had already spread to the Supreme Sect, causing a stir that could be imagined throughout the world. There's going to be more blood and carnage. Guan silently thought, having an authentic copy of the theory of heaven in his hands, which made him somewhat anticipate what the future held. Not everything was he inclined to deduce. He now preferred to keep some mysteries for the future, for even with his intervention, new variables would arise. Jiang Shi and Shengtian practiced against each other for a while until Guan called a halt. Master and disciple approached Guan, and after briefly pointing out a few things, he departed. Although Jiang Shi possessed extraordinary talents in perceiving fate, it didn't mean Guan had to cultivate him. With many geniuses by Guan's side, if everyone were to be given key development, how could one enjoy life? On the way back, an Exine inquired about Guan's opinion on the true immortal inheritance. Guan said that to discern the true from the false, one must experience it firsthand. Blood Prison Great Saint wondered whether his master might be a true immortal descended to the human realm. To this day, no one knew of the master's origin. Blood Prison Great Saint gazed at Guan's retreating figure with eyes full of reverence and anticipation. Whether this life would achieve the Tao rested on just how strong the master was. Guan heard the thoughts of Blood Prison Great Saint, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. 100 years passed in a flash. Chen Luo, with his white hair, stood on a cliff, gazing at the continuous mountains ahead. Above, there were more cultivators flying back and forth than birds, most of them heading in the same direction. Supreme Sect. Chen Luo's face, aged with time, showed a nervous yet hopeful expression. After so many years, he had finally arrived at the Supreme Sect. From the sacred domain to the Supreme Sect, It took him over 100 years, with quite a few benefactors helping him along the way, otherwise he would have perished en route. A century of tempering had made him more composed, devoid of his previous impetuosity. The supreme sect, the leading sect of the Taitsong continent, is also the pillar of this pure land in the human world. It is said that the supreme sect harbors immortals, who once saved all living beings. Some call him the supporting Tao sword venerable, others the hidden sage. Regardless of how one imagines him, it is undeniable that his existence has indeed brought peace to all living beings. A voice came from behind Chen Luo. He saw a cyan-robed Taoist holding a horsetail whisk approaching. The Taoist appeared to be in his 40s, his beard fluttering in the wind, with a small crane perched on his right shoulder. Chen Luo turned his head to see him approaching and asked, "Senior, now that we have arrived at the Supreme Sect, can you tell me why you have come?" Without this senior's help, he feared it would take tens or even hundreds of years more to reach the Taitsong continent. The cyan-robed Taoist looked into the distance and said, "I am here seeking the hope that will end an era of turmoil." "Are you speaking of the supporting Tao sword venerable?" Chen Luo asked, puzzled. The cyan-robed Taoist shook his head and said, "You've heard of the theory of heaven, right? There's an authentic copy hidden within the Supreme Sect." Chen Luo revealed a look of surprise. Just as he was about to ask more, the cyan-robed Taoist waved his horsetail whisk, whisking him into the breeze and toward the outer sect city in the distance. Chen Luo stood amid the wind, reining in his curiosity. He had not forgotten the purpose of his journey. All these years, his thoughts had constantly turned to his wife. The Saint King had sent him to the Supreme Sect without telling him what to do next, so he was quite at a loss. Without exchange of words, the two arrived at the outer sect city and queued to enter. Just after entering, a man approached Chen Luo and said, "Are you Chen Luo from the sacred domain?" The speaker was none other than Long Qing, who was curiously sizing up Chen Luo. Upon hearing this, Chen Luo became instantly excited and quickly raised his hand, asking, "I am Chen Luo, and I have met you, fellow Taoist. May I ask if fellow Taoist has been arranged by the Saint King?" "Saint King?" Long Qing shook his head with a smile, and then said, "Come with me." He was also curious about why his master wanted to meet this person, and he prepared to understand him properly on the way. Long Qing turned and left, with Chen Luo hastily following. The cyan-robed Taoist watched Long Qing's retreating back, his eyes flickering as he pondered something unknown. Meanwhile, outside the Third Medicine Valley, in a mountain forest, Gu was sparring in swordsmanship with Qin Chuan. Using fingers as his sword, he easily caught all of Qin Chuan's sword techniques. At 111, Qin Chuan possessed the cultivation level of the 6th layer of the divinity transformation realm, dressed in black, wielding a treasure sword, spirited and vigorous. At the age of 50 he was taken away by Guan, and after 61 years of comprehending the sword Tao by Guan's side, his true strength was far more terrifying than his realm suggested. He had become a famously talented individual of the Third Medicine Valley, and although no one knew his background, the fact that Guan had taken notice of him clearly marked him as an extraordinary genius. LV Baiyan also coveted Qin Chuan, occasionally coming to inquire about his well-being. At the moment, Qin Chuan felt powerless inside as he believed that his own grasp of the sword Tao had reached the transformation realm. In a pure contest of swordsmanship, he could not find the slightest flaw in his master's technique. Guan was smiling as he watched the fierce attacks from Qin Chuan, feeling very satisfied in his heart. Isn't this the person Xiao Chuan wanted to become? After another 100 techniques, Guan said, "Let's stop here." Qin Chuan sheathed his sword and then raised his sword in salute to Guan, his eyes brimming with admiration. Was this the strength of the world's #1 sword cultivator? Having been in the Third Medicine Valley for so long, he had come to realize that Guan was the supporting Tao sword venerable who would save the world, making him feel lucky and gradually emerging from the shadows of his childhood. After offering a few pointers, Guan led Qin Chuan back toward the valley. Along the way, they saw many disciples practicing, all saluting and greeting Guan upon seeing him while looking at Qin Chuan with envy. With so many talents in Medicine Valley nowadays, Few had the opportunity to be personally instructed by the master. Furthermore, Chen Chuan was someone the master had brought back from outside. Chen Chuan paid no mind to those gazes, humbly consulting his master on his doubts and discussing them one by one. They quickly returned to the valley. Long Qing and Chen Luo were waiting in front of the loft. Chen Luo looked very nervous, with the blood prison great saint scrutinizing him. From afar, Chen Chuan glanced at Chen Luo only once before withdrawing his mind, continuing to contemplate the sword Dao. Having lost his father as an infant, he had no memories of him. Long Qing, upon seeing Guan, hastily greeted, "Hello, master." Chen Luo then looked towards Guan and Chen Chuan, his eyes lighting up, not because he recognized Chen Chuan, but because he was dazzled by Guan's appearance and demeanor. Such an immortal existed in the world. Guan arrived in front of Long Qing and asked him to take his younger disciple away. Immediately, Long Qing left with Chen Chuan, arm in arm, leaving Chen Luo alone, nervously facing Guan. "Let's talk upstairs," Guan said with a smile and then led the way upstairs. Chen Luo took a deep breath and followed Guan's steps. Once inside, he closed the door and walked to the desk, before suddenly kneeling down. "Please, Senior, save my wife," Chen Luo said through clenched teeth, without showing much excitement, as he was trying hard to control his emotions. Guan looked at him and asked, "What have you gained from your experiences over these years, and have you come to any realizations?" Chen Luo looked up, confronting Guan's gaze. Prepared for this moment, he replied, "Yes, people other than me suffer in this world, and I am not the most tormented among them. Besides my wife, I have parents and a son to care for. I shouldn't be so selfish, so impulsive." Guan shook his head slightly and said, "You're wrong. There is one more thing you've overlooked. Please enlighten me, Senior." Chen Luo spoke cautiously, while also wondering what he had missed. Guan's gaze turned indifferent, posing an immense pressure on Chen Luo, who said, "You're fortunate to be born in the immortal cultivation world." What is immortal cultivation? It is the pursuit of the power to overturn all tragedies. Faced with the death of your wife, you should transform your emotions into the drive for immortal cultivation. Should you ascend to immortality, you very well may save your wife. He was entwined with the celestial Tao destiny to the extent that Guan couldn't deduce his cause and effect or his destiny. He Qingsong, neither servile nor overbearing, said, "I wonder what sword Venerable thinks of this world. Do you intend to become an immortal god who protects all living beings?" After Guan spoke, Blood Prison Great Saint fell silent, casting a suspicious glance towards He Qingsong. Could this person have an extraordinary origin? To him, He Qingsong was just a common cultivator of the Nirvana realm. In the Supreme Sect nowadays, being at the Nirvana realm was not uncommon. Years before, a celestial and earthly immortal had become an elder of the Supreme Sect, and it had been quite the affair. Guan shook his head and said, "I have no particular thoughts, nor do I wish to become an immortal god. I merely wish to live peacefully here, savoring the passage of time." He Qingsong immediately followed up, "If that is so, why, then, would Sword Venerable keep the theory of heaven?" Theory of heaven? Blood Prison Great Saint was taken aback, unaware that their master had a piece of the theory of heaven. Far away, before the mountain of 10,000 swords where Ju Luo Sword Monarch was meditating and enlightenment on his sword skills, he opened his eyes and his gaze fell on He Qingsong. This aura, could it be? Ju Luo Sword Monarch frowned, a bad premonition rising in his heart. Guan asked with a smile, "Do you want the theory of heaven?" He Qingsong replied, "I do not wish for it, merely that its presence in the hands of Sword Venerable means the great fortune seekers of this world cannot obtain the true immortal inheritance. Your Tao practice should not intervene in the operations of the world." Guan looked at him as if trying to see through him, but He Qingsong was not intimidated and met Guan's gaze. Blood Prison Great Saint's eyes flashed coldly upon hearing He Qingsong not addressing Guan with respect. An Xian, Long Qing, and Chen Chuan noticed this scene and approached, with other disciples noticing someone was obstructing their master and something seemed amiss, drawing more of them closer. Long Qing moved the fastest. He arrived in front of He Qingsong, sizing him up and saying, "It's you. I've seen you before. What is your identity that you dare to be so disrespectful to my master?" He Qingsong did not answer, and just quietly stared at Guan, waiting for his response. Guan, evidently interested, asked, "Have you come for the sake of all living beings?" He Qingsong replied, "I have come for the operation of the world. This past month, living among the cultivators of the Supreme Sect, I have come to know your character and actions. If you truly have a compassionate and merciful heart, you should release the theory of heaven to allow this realm to welcome its savior sooner. This too is the will of the heavenly Tao." Guan raised his right hand, palm up, and the theory of heaven materialized in it. Chapter 482 Xingtian, Your Highness? Guan, Long Qing, Chen Chuan, and the others looked at Zhu Shi with puzzled expressions. Just how significant was this woman's background? Especially Chen Chuan, who, despite having been in the Third Medicine Valley for decades, didn't have an in-depth understanding of the valley because he was devoted to the Sword Tao, spending almost all his time cultivating. In his eyes, Third Medicine Valley was a place where hidden dragons and crouching tigers lay. He Qingsong, who always spoke of all living beings, to appear detached and extraordinary, was calling Zhu Shi Your Highness. Just who was Zhu Shi? Suddenly, Chen Chuan felt he had been too rash and perhaps should pay more attention to his surroundings. Zhu Shi, with her back to He Qingsong, bowed her head, tightly gripping the theory of heaven. It was clear she was struggling psychologically. After hesitating for a while, Zhu Shi still left holding the theory of heaven, leaving the onlookers even more confused. He Qingsong watched her departing figure and didn't speak further to hold her back. Instead, he furrowed his brows and fell into deep thought. "Disperse now, disperse." An Exan spoke up, waving his hands at the disciples gathered around from all directions. Seeing this, the disciples could only scatter with confusion and curiosity still in their minds. Long Qing approached He Qingsong and curiously asked, "What is Zhu Zai's background? Tell me about it." Although He Qingsong's origins were unclear, he never feared danger within the Third Medicine Valley. He Qingsong glanced at Long Qing and said, "She has many backgrounds, and you should have heard of her title in one lifetime. She is known as the Xingtian." After saying that, He Qingsong turned and left. "Xingtian?" Long Qing was stunned, as were Guan, Chen Chuan, and others, including some disciples who hadn't walked far. They were shocked too. The name of Xingtian was known by all. Who didn't know it belonged to the strongest being in the Holy Court, the mightiest in the celestial spirit great world? Whether Xingtian or supporting Tao Sword Venerable was stronger was hard to judge for all living beings. After the disappearance of Xingtian, supporting Tao Sword Venerable emerged, and the two never confronted each other. Of course, those of higher realms all knew that supporting Tao Sword Venerable far surpassed Xingtian in cultivation level. Regardless, Xingtian made an indescribable impression on the beings of the celestial spirit great world. Many life forms equated Xingtian with Tsungtian. Blood Prison Great Saint looked up and couldn't help asking, "Master, is Zhu Shi Xingtian?" Guan sat on his back and said nonchalantly, "Who knows? In any case, it's irrelevant to you and me. The one and only primordial swallowing Yuan body." He saw a figure in white, seemingly a woman, looking down at the medicine garden from atop the cliff. He couldn't help but wonder, who was this woman? He didn't ask, nor did he try to calculate it. When Shenzhen finished the painting, she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, how come I've painted a woman? Who is this?" Guan rolled his eyes and said, "You painted it and you're asking me?" Shenzhen picked up the painting, remarking, "I always feel like this painting is from the far, far future." Guan teased, "What? You can predict the future now? Don't say that, it's actually possible." Many of the images are things I haven't experienced, and they don't match the present or the past. Maybe I have begun to achieve enlightenment after you taught me, but what I've achieved is not the way of cause and effect, Shenzhen said seriously. Guan smiled but did not argue. Shenzhen indeed had already begun to step into the initial understanding of the Great Tao. What she contemplated was not the way of cause and effect, but the way of fate. Having stepped into enlightenment, Shenzhen had surpassed all living beings. Many experts of the immortal Tao spent their entire lives unable to achieve enlightenment, including the divine thought true immortal. Shenzhen continued to share her dreams, revealing her insights into the way of fate. Guan listened intently, understanding that even though his cultivation level was higher, he might still find inspiration in her insights. Outside the supreme sect, on a mountaintop, a man in a black robe stood with his sword in his arms, his white hair fluttering in the wind. Beside him stood a dozen cultivators, each exuding an extraordinary aura and holding various magical treasures. My lord, the supreme sect is just ahead. Is the supporting Tao sword venerable really not going to intervene in this opportunity? A masked woman asked the man in the black robe, nervously. They had lived for many years, having experienced the supporting Tao sword venerable struggles against the profound desolate demon god and the silent destruction god emperor, and held a deep reverence for him from the bottom of their hearts. An elder spoke up. The supporting Tao sword venerable has released the theory of heaven as a statement of intent. We just need to ensure that we don't harm the innocent. The rest echoed his sentiments, their words filled with a longing for the theory of heaven. The man in the black robe's face was indifferent. He spoke calmly, once we arrive at the supreme sect, we must first visit someone. He should be aware of the supporting Tao sword venerable stance. As the words fell, a rainbow light swept across the celestial vault above him, quickly disappearing into the horizon. The masked woman frowned and asked, "Was that the 9 extremes Saint God?" The man in the black robe replied, "Indeed it was. I didn't expect such an arrogant man to also pursue the theory of heaven. It seems he now knows his celestial mandate." He leapt up, turning into a wisp of black mist, soaring towards the horizon, with the others quickly following suit. Meanwhile, in the third Medicine Valley, within a forest, she stood face to face with Zhu Luo Sword Monarch, who looked with interest at the theory of heaven in her hand. "Shannon, do you really wish to yield this opportunity to me? The Sword Venerable has entrusted it to you, perhaps he sees potential in you." She shook her head. "I am not the Shengtian you speak of. All I know is that I can't keep it safe now. Since the Sword Venerable does not wish to deal with the repercussions, I shall give it to you. You are strong enough, perhaps you can claim the true immortal inheritance." Hearing this, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch sneered derisively, and with a wave of his right hand, the theory of heaven was drawn into his possession through the air. "Shengyun, why are you so cowardly in this life? Is it because you haven't awakened your memory? But that shouldn't be the reason. No matter how many times one reincarnates, one's nature doesn't change," Zhu Luo Sword Monarch taunted. She didn't answer, but instead, she exhaled deeply. Seeing her so meek, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch found it dull. He followed with a leap, turning into a beam of sword light and vanishing. "I am Zhu Luo Sword Monarch, holding the theory of heaven. Those who seek immortal fate shall challenge me." Zhu Luo Sword Monarch's domineering voice echoed between heaven and earth. At the same time, a vast sword intent erupted from afar. She turned her head to look, but Zhu Luo Sword Monarch's figure was nowhere to be seen. She thought to herself, "Luckily there are still fools. No, I must leave the supreme sect." She glanced in the direction of Gu An's pavilion, hesitating for a moment before offering a salute to Guan from across the distance. "Master, forgive me. I'm not only saving myself but also don't want to cause you any trouble." With that, she didn't look back as she ran towards the valley exit. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.